Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in Akame ga Kill and got married to Esdeath and Chelsea? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Northern Anomaly. The wind was a blade. It screamed down from the jagged peaks of the Great Northern Range, carrying shards of ice that flayed any exposed skin and drove the cold deep into the marrow of a man's bones. For the people of Kaltspitz, a village fortified with stubborn pride and thick granite walls, it was a sound they had known for generations. But tonight, the wind carried a different sound. It carried the splintering of ancient pines and a chittering, hungry screech that promised a death far colder than any blizzard. Bjorn, his beard a latticework of frozen breath, gripped the Odin shaft of his spear until his knuckles were white stones. He stood on the main watchtower, a lonely sentinel peering into a maelstrom of snow and shadow. Below, the entire village was armed. Men with rusted swords and pitted shields stood shoulder to shoulder with women wielding hunting bows and sharpened farming tools. They were a hard people, but the thing in the storm was harder. "Anything," yelled a voice from below. It was Gunther, the village elder, his face a roadmap of worry carved into weathered leather. "They're testing the perimeter," Bjorn shouted back, his voice swallowed almost instantly by the gale. "Circling, waiting for us to show a weakness." He didn't need to see them clearly to know their number. The ground itself vibrated with their passage. Frost Gorgons, a pack of them. In a normal season, a single Gorgon was a terror, a creature of nightmare, a 20-foot-tall horror of thick, white fur, 6 arachnidan legs that ended in ice-climbing hooks, and a reptilian head whose mandibles could shear a man in half. A pack of a dozen or more. That wasn't a hunt, it was an extinction event. They had likely been driven down from the highest peaks by a harsher-than-usual winter, and Kaltspitz, the only source of warmth and meat for 100 miles, was a beacon in the dark. One of the beasts, bolder than the rest, surged from the swirling snow. It was a terrifying silhouette, its multiple red eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. It slammed its immense weight against the main gate, and the ancient, iron-banded wood groaned, threatening to give way. A volley of arrows flew from the ramparts, most of them skittering harmlessly off the creature's armored carapace. One found a joint, and the Gorgon shrieked, a sound like grinding glaciers, before retreating back into the storm. It was a small victory that felt like a defeat. They had angered it. Now, they wouldn't just be food. They would be sport. "They'll breach the gate before dawn," Gunther muttered, joining Bjorn on the tower. He leaned against the parapet, his old bones aching with a weariness that went beyond age. "My grandfather built that gate. I suppose it's fitting I'll die behind it." Bjorn didn't respond. He scanned the blizzard, his eyes tracing the paths of the circling shadows. There was no hope. The nearest Imperial garrison was a week's march south, and they wouldn't have come for a single village anyway. They were alone. "The tales," a young woman whispered from the stairwell, her face pale with fear. "The ones the trappers tell. About the golden ghost." Gunther snorted, a plume of white vapor. "A fairy tale, girl. A story to scare children into staying close to the fire. No man commands the spirits of the forest." "But they say he is not a man," she insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of desperate strength. "They say he has hair like the summer sun and eyes bluer than a mountain lake. They say he walks without a sound and danger beasts bow before him. And I say we put our faith in stone and steel." "Not whispers in the dark," Gunther grumbled, though his gaze drifted back to the oppressive wilderness. Bjorn had heard the stories, too, of a wandering figure who appeared and disappeared with the northern lights. A kitsune, some said, a fox spirit in human form. A demon, others claimed. But the few who claimed to have been saved by him called him a sage. A protector. Bjorn had always dismissed it. The North didn't make protectors. It made survivors and corpses. There was nothing in between. Suddenly, the Gorgons stopped circling. The hungry chittering ceased, replaced by a low, guttural growling that spoke of confusion, of a challenge. The vibrations in the ground shifted. Something else was out there with them. Bjorn squinted, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through a momentary lull in the driving snow, he saw it. A figure, standing alone between the village gate and the assembled pack of monsters. He was cloaked, the hood pulled low, but even from this distance, there was an aura of impossible calm about him. He hadn't approached from the forest, he was just there. Gods above, Bjorn breathed. The Alpha Gorgon, a behemoth easily a third larger than the others, took a step forward. It towered over the lone figure, its massive head lowered, mandibles clicking, a threat that could curdle blood. The figure did not move. He simply stood, with his hands tucked into the sleeves of his simple traveler's cloak. Slowly, the figure raised a hand and pushed back his hood. Even from 100 yards away, in the heart of a blizzard, the color was unmistakable. It was a shock of defiant, brilliant gold. The whispers were true. The man's voice, when it came, was not a shout. It was a calm, clear tone that somehow cut through the roaring wind as if it were a gentle breeze. This is not your hunting ground. Turn back. The Alpha Gorgon responded with a deafening roar, a blast of sound and fury that shook the very stones of the watchtower. It reared up on its hind legs, ready to bring its crushing forelimbs down and obliterate the insolent speck of life before it. The man didn't flinch. He brought his hands together in a simple clap, a sound that was impossibly sharp and final. He closed his eyes, and the world went quiet. Not just the wind, though that too seemed to die down to a respectful murmur. The air itself changed. The biting cold lost its edge, replaced by a strange, vibrant energy that made the hairs on Bjorn's arms stand on end. Orange pigment, like teardrops of sunset, appeared at the corners of the man's eyes. He opened them, and his pupils were no longer round, but horizontal, like those of a toad or a goat. He looked ancient and primal, a part of the very nature he now commanded. The Alpha Gorgon froze mid-strike, its posture of absolute aggression turning to one of wary confusion. It sniffed the air, its reptilian head tilting. The other Gorgons shuffled their hooked feet, their red eyes blinking. The raw, predatory killing intent that had saturated the air moments before had vanished, replaced by a palpable sense of peace. The golden-haired man took a slow step forward. He reached out a hand, palm open. The Alpha, a creature that had been ready to tear down a stone wall, took a hesitant step back. It let out a low, questioning rumble. "There is no food for you here," the man said, his voice resonating with that same unnatural calm. "Only fear and death. Your path lies east, towards the sunken valley. The rock goats are plentiful this season. Go, live." He took another step. The Gorgon lowered its head, no longer a predator facing its prey, but a subordinate before its chieftain. The man placed his hand gently on the beast's snout, a gesture so suicidally foolish that Bjorn forgot to breathe. The monster, capable of biting a man in two, simply closed its eyes and leaned into the touch, letting out a soft, almost purring growl. Then, the man did something that shattered Bjorn's understanding of the world. A sphere of swirling, blue light, the size of a melon, materialized in his other hand. It spun with a life of its own, emitting a high-pitched whirring that was the sound of concentrated power. But he didn't attack with it. He turned and pressed the sphere against the packed snow and frozen earth beside him. The explosion wasn't fiery, it was pure kinetic force. It blasted a wrench 20 feet deep and 50 yards long, throwing up a curtain of rock and ice. It was a demonstration, a show of force delivered with the nonchalance of a farmer tilling a field. It was a message to the Alpha, clear and undeniable. "I can give you peace, or I can give you this." The Alpha Gorgon understood. It pulled its head back, gave a short, commanding screech to its pack, and turned. As one, the monsters that had been Kaltspitz's doom moments before lumbered away, following the direction the man had indicated, disappearing into the blizzard from whence they came. The silence they left behind was more profound than any sound. The golden-haired man stood for a moment, his back to the village. The orange markings around his eyes faded. He pulled his hood back up, becoming just a traveler once more. Without a backward glance, he began to walk, not east or west, but north, deeper into the frozen hell of the highest peaks. "Wait," Bjorn found his voice, shouting from the tower. "Who are you? How can we repay you?" The figure paused, his form already starting to blur in the thickening snow. He didn't turn around. "Reinforce your gate," his voice drifted back, clear as a bell. "Winter is not over." And then he was gone. Not vanished in a puff of smoke, but simply swallowed by the storm, his footsteps leaving no trace. On the watchtower, Gunther sank to his knees, his face a mask of dumbfounded awe. The young woman who had spoken of the legend was openly weeping, but her tears were of relief, not fear. Bjorn remained standing, his spear held loosely in his numb fingers. He stared at the trench carved into the frozen earth, a scar of impossible power. The whispers weren't fairy tales. They were understatements. The golden ghost was real. And he was something this world had never seen before. Far to the south, the Imperial icebreaker Triumphant will cleave through the coastal sea ice, its massive hull, magically reinforced and partially constructed from Esdeath's own power. Shattering flows the size of houses with contemptuous ease. The air here was merely cold, not the life-stealing variant of the true north, but on the ship's command deck, the atmosphere was glacial. General Esdeath sat on a throne carved from a single, unmelting block of pure ice. She was the picture of lethal elegance, her long, light blue hair cascading over the shoulders of her immaculate white uniform. A cup of tea, still steaming in the freezing air, sat untouched on a small ice table beside her. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as her hair, were narrowed with a familiar, dangerous emotion, boredom. Her three most loyal subordinates, the three beasts, stood before her, awaiting her pleasure. Daedara, a hulking brute with a mouth full of sharp teeth, shifted his weight impatiently. Niao, a slender, cat-like youth, was polishing his flute taigu, scream, with a detached air. Liver, the oldest and most stoic, a former general himself, stood at perfect attention. The reports are in, Lady Esdeath, Liver said, his voice a respectful baritone. The northern tribe's pathetic rebellion has been pacified. Your advance forces were thorough. The ringleaders have been flayed and their hides displayed in the town squares. The remaining tribes have renewed their oaths of loyalty. Esdeath took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea. The porcelain cup was freezing to the touch, but she didn't seem to notice. Thorough, she repeated, the word dripping with disappointment. That means there is no one left for me to fight. There is always sport to be had, my lady, Daedara grinned, cracking his massive knuckles. The danger beasts of the north are legendary. We could hunt for a few weeks. Snap some spines. I have killed every notable class of danger beast in this frozen wasteland, Daedara, Esdeath replied. Her tone flat. They are predictable. They fight for survival. There is no nuance, no delicious despair in their eyes as you break them. It's unsatisfying. She stood, her high-heeled boots clicking on the ice-coated deck. She walked to the large, armored window, gazing out at the endless expanse of white. This was her homeland, the place that had forged her, had taught her the only truth she had ever needed, the strong live, and the weak die. It was a simple, perfect philosophy. Yet, it had led her to a place where there were no strong left to challenge her. She had climbed her mountain of corpses, and now, at the summit, she was utterly alone. The Prime Minister's other directive remains, Liver reminded her gently. To find powerful new recruits for your special police force. Esdeath gave a short, unamused laugh. The Jaegers, a kennel for the minister to fill with whatever loyal dogs he can find. I am to be their handler. As if I have the time or the interest to leash train assassins. She turned back to them, a cruel spark in her eyes. But his instructions were clear. Find those with power, and my other hunt, my personal one, continues. Niao looked up from his flute. You still seek a partner, my lady. One who can meet your specific qualifications. Esdeath's lips curved into a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. Her list of requirements for a potential lover was famous among her inner circle. He had to be younger than her, from the countryside, possess a smile of radiant purity, and, most importantly, be more powerful than her. The first three were trivial. The last was, she was beginning to fear, an impossibility. I seek a man who can tame me, she said, her voice dropping to a low, hungry purr. And I am beginning to believe such a man doesn't exist. It was then that a junior officer, trembling, entered the command deck. He was a new transfer from the capital, not yet accustomed to the sheer oppressive weight of Esdeath's presence. General, he stammered, saluting shakily. A final regional report from the advance scouts. Just a local curiosity, but it was flagged as anomalous. Esdeath raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Speak. It's a rumor, mostly. From a village in the Dragon's Tooth Pass, Kaltspitz. They were besieged by a pack of frost gorgons. A dozen, at least. Our scouts Air preparing to write the village off as a total loss. And, Esdeath prompted, her patience wearing thin. And when the patrol arrived this morning to confirm, the village was untouched. The gorgons were gone. The villagers claim they were saved by a single man. A wanderer. Daedara snorted. A storyteller, more like. Probably one old man with a bow who got a lucky shot and spun a grand tale about it. The villagers called him the Golden Ghost, the officer continued, swallowing hard. They said he didn't fight the beasts. They said, he commanded them. And then he carved a trench in the Ozone earth with a spiraling ball of blue light. The deck fell silent. The three beasts exchanged glances. A taigu, perhaps, but none they knew of had such an effect. And commanding danger beasts was unheard of. A description? Esdeath asked, her voice suddenly sharp, a sliver of genuine interest cutting through her boredom. Golden hair, my lady. That's all they were sure of. They said he was headed north, into the storm-crowned peaks. Where nothing lives. Fairy tales, Daedara grumbled. Esdeath smiled. It was a true smile this time, wide and full of predatory glee. All the boredom had vanished from her eyes. Replaced by a brilliant, manic light. It was the look she got before a truly promising battle. A man with golden hair, who can command danger beasts and wields an unknown power, entering the harshest wilderness in the world, she mused, her voice a low thrum of excitement. That is not a fairy tale. That is a challenge. She turned to face her throne, her back to her men. Liver, she commanded. Divert the ship to the nearest port. We are making landfall. Now, Daedara, prepare for a hunt. We are going to find this Golden Ghost. And the recruits for the Jaegers, my lady. Liver asked. Esdeath's smile widened. Perhaps, she said, her gaze fixed on the northern horizon, I am about to find the only recruit I will ever need. The hunt was on. Not for sport, not for duty. This was personal. For the first time in a long time, Esdeath felt the thrill of pursuing something that might actually be able to fight back. The air at 10,000 feet was thin and tasted of ozone. Naruto sat in a perfect meditative posture on a narrow ledge of rock, the world a dizzying panorama of white peaks and gray clouds below. The wind that would have frozen a normal man to death in minutes was a soothing caress on his skin. He didn't need his cloak here. The vibrant, life-giving energy of the planet itself, nature energy, flowed through him, a furnace in his core. You're enjoying this too much, a deep, rumbling voice echoed in the back of his mind. It was a voice he had known for most of his 2 lives, the voice of the colossal, 9-tailed fox sealed within him. Naruto didn't open his eyes. It's quiet, Kurama, peaceful, reminds me of Mount Myoboku, without the stuffy old toads. HMPH. Quiet is one word for it. Desolate is another. This world is harsh. Broken. The energy is thin, tainted with something sour. Naruto's mental expression soured slightly. I know. It's not just the people. The land itself is crying out. All this hatred, this corruption in the south, it's poisoning everything. Like a sickness. He had been in this world for 26 years. He'd been born in a small, forgotten village in these very mountains, a nameless orphan with shockingly bright hair and strange marks on his cheeks. He'd retained everything. His memories, his chakra, his oldest and grumpiest friend. At first, it had been a shock, a profound dislocation. But Naruto was a survivor. He'd learned the rules of this new, brutal world quickly. He had spent his youth wandering, observing, and training, pushing his abilities far beyond what he had ever achieved in his first life. It had a global war to fight or a village to lead, he'd had nothing but time to perfect his arts. His sage mode was now as natural as breathing, a state he could enter in an instant. His control over Kurama's chakra was absolute. He was, by any measure, a god walking among mortals. But he was a lonely god. He had seen the suffering in this world. The decadent, rotting empire, the brutal revolution. Ares who were becoming what they fought against, the innocent people ground to dust between the 2 millstones. It was the same old story. The same cycle of hatred he had sworn to break. So you save a village from some overgrown lizards. Then what? Kurama prodded. Are you going to keep playing hermit until the whole world burns? That's not the brat I remember. I needed to understand, Kurama, Naruto projected back. I couldn't just charge in and declare myself the new sage of 6 paths. They'd have called me a monster or a madman. I needed to know the players, the sickness and the cure. And I think I'm almost ready. His sage-enhanced senses, which could feel the flicker of a mouse's heart a mile away, suddenly flared. He felt 4 presences approaching. Fast. 3 were moderately powerful, like seasoned soldiers. The fourth was a blizzard. A maelstrom of cold, dominating power that felt like a hole in the natural world. It was a power that didn't coexist with nature, it crushed it, bent it, forced it into submission. It was the antithesis of his own. Naruto opened his eyes, the placid blue returning. He stood up, brushing a dusting of snow from his simple black pants. He could feel her intent. It was as sharp and clear as a shard of ice. Find, confront, conquer. Well, Kurama rumbled with a hint of dark amusement. Looks like quiet time is over. This one feels interesting. Interesting is one word for it, Naruto thought, a small, wry smile touching his lips. He turned to face the direction of the approaching power. Let's see what the Empire's monster looks like up close. Esdeath moved through the mountain pass like an avenging spirit. The blizzard that had given the villagers of Kultspitz so much trouble was her natural element. The wind parted before her, the snow refusing to touch her uniform. Her 3 beasts struggled to keep pace, their heavy breathing creating thick clouds in the frigid air. Lady Esdeath, the trail ends here. Liver called out, pointing to a sheer cliff face. There's nowhere for him to go. Esdeath didn't stop. Her senses, honed by a lifetime of hunting, were screaming at her. He was close, very close. She looked up, her gaze tracing the impossible line of the cliff, and saw him. A lone figure, standing on a ledge 500 feet up, his golden hair a beacon against the gray rock. He was looking down at them, waiting. Her heart gave a single, powerful thrum. There was no fear in his stance, no surprise, only a quiet, unwavering confidence that infuriated and fascinated her in equal measure. So, the ghost shows himself, she said, her voice laced with predatory excitement. She didn't need to shout. She knew he could hear her. You are a difficult man to find. Naruto's reply was just as clear, carried on the wind. Only for those who don't know where to look. You, on the other hand, are as subtle as an avalanche. Deidara bristled at the disrespect. Insolent dog. Do you know who you're speaking to? This is General Esdeath. Naruto's gaze drifted past Esdeath to her 3 subordinates. He dismissed them with a glance. I'm not talking to her dogs. I'm talking to her. Esdeath laughed, a sound like cracking ice. The sheer audacity was exhilarating. I have questions for you, Ghost. This power you have, this control over beasts. Is it a taigu? No. The answer was simple, direct. Then what is it? She pressed, her eyes narrowing. It's me, Naruto replied. He took a step to the edge of the ledge, looking down at her. A better question is, what do you want, General? You didn't come all this way for a chat. I want you, Esdeath stated, the words leaving no room for misinterpretation. I want your power, your strength. The Prime Minister has tasked me with finding unique individuals. You will join my Jaegers. You will serve the Empire. You will serve me. It was a command, not an offer. It was how she had lived her entire life. She saw strength, and she took it. Naruto chuckled, a low, warm sound that seemed to mock the very cold around them. Serve you. Serve an empire that eats its own people. No, I don't think so. I'm not a tool to be used. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees. Tiny crystals of ice began to form in the air around Esdeath. It was not a request. You will submit, or you will be broken. A lot of people have tried to break me, Naruto said, high. S voice losing its amused edge and taking on a core of solid steel. They're all gone, and I'm still here. He hopped down from the ledge, landing on the snowy ground before her as lightly as a falling leaf. Up close, she could see him clearly for the first time. The strange, whisker-like marks on his cheeks. The eyes, so impossibly blue, that held no fear of her, only a sort of weary appraisal. He was handsome, in a rugged, unconventional way. And he radiated an energy that was the polar opposite of her own, not the cold of death, but the vibrant warmth of life. You have two choices, he said, holding up two fingers. 1. You and your pets turn around and leave me to my peace. 2. You try to make me submit. He lowered one finger. I strongly recommend you pick the first one. It was the final straw. The challenge was laid bare. Esdeath's lips pulled back from her teeth in a feral grin. I was hoping you'd say that. She didn't move, but the ground at Naruto's feet erupted. A dozen massive spikes of ice, each the size of a spear, shot upwards, aiming to impale him. It was an attack that would have turned any normal man into a bloody sieve. Naruto didn't even seem to move. One moment he was there. The next he was standing 10 feet to the left, his hands in his pockets. The ice spikes shattered against each other, their target gone. Too slow, he said, his voice calm. Esdeath's excitement grew. She flicked her wrist, and a volley of ice daggers materialized in the air, 100 of them, all aimed at him. They shot forward, a glittering swarm of death. This time, he moved. He flowed around the attack, a blur of black and gold, weaving through the deadly projectiles with an impossible grace. Not a single one touched him. He was a leaf in the wind, a fish in the current. Is that all? He asked. Appearing behind Deidara, the big man roared and swung his massive axe Taigu, double-edged axe, Belvac. Naruto simply placed a hand on his back. A pulse of blue energy, almost invisible, flared for a second. Deidara's eyes went wide, and he collapsed, unconscious, his Taigu clattering to the snow. Niao, seeing his chance, raised his flute to his lips and played a piercing note. The music was designed to cripple the listener's will, to shatter their morale. It had no effect. Naruto glanced at him, and his blue eyes bled into a slitted, predatory red. An immense, suffocating pressure slammed into Niao. A wave of pure killing intent so ancient and powerful it felt like the world itself wanted him dead. The cat boy dropped his flute, clutching his head and screaming, falling to his knees. You're relying on your friends too much, Naruto said, his red eyes fixed on Esdeath. It was Kurama's power, a taste of the beast within, and he had barely used a fraction of it. Liver, ever the loyal soldier, drew his own Taigu, a ring that controlled water. Black Marlin, he shot streams of high-pressure water at Naruto. Naruto didn't even look. A hand, made of bubbling, golden-orange energy, erupted from his back, caught the streams of water, and casually threw Liver into a snowbank 100 yards away. In less than 10 seconds, her Elite Three beasts had been neutralized. Not killed, not even seriously injured, just dismissed. Now, it was just the two of them. Esdeath was breathing a little faster, her cheeks flushed. This wasn't a battle, it was a courtship. He was systematically stripping away her defenses, proving his dominance. He was everything she had ever dreamed of. Impressive, she breathed, her voice thick with admiration. She drew her rapier, its slender blade gleaming. But that was just the warm-up. She vanished, her speed far surpassing her subordinates. She appeared at his side, her rapier aimed at his heart. Clang. He had blocked it with a kunai, a simple, three-pronged knife he seemed to have produced from nowhere. Their faces were inches apart. He could feel the cold radiating from her. She could feel the warmth from him. You're strong, Naruto admitted, his red eyes fading back to blue. Faster than anyone I've met in this world. Not fast enough, she hissed, and the ice at their feet exploded, forming a cage to trap him. He pushed off her, shattering the kunai, and flipped backwards, landing 50 feet away. Cute trick. I have more. She raised her hand. Weiss Schnabel. Dozens of ice projectiles flew from her palm. At the same time, she gestured with her other hand. Hagelsprung. A colossal sphere of ice, the size of a small house, formed above him and plummeted down, aiming to crush him into paste. She was coordinating multiple, high-level attacks at once. It was a display of mastery that had won her countless battles. Naruto just smiled. My turn. He made a single hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of smokeless puffs, 1,000 Narutos appeared, filling the mountain pass. They were perfect copies, each one radiating the same confidence. Esdeath froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. What was this? There was no Taigu that could do this. It wasn't an illusion. She could feel the presence of every single one of them. The 1,000 Narutos moved as one. Some leapt into the air, meeting her ice projectiles with kicks and punches, shattering them in mid-flight. A group of 100 clones formed a pyramid, caught the giant falling ice sphere, and with a collective roar, hurled it back at her. Esdeath was forced to create a thick wall of ice to defend herself, the impact of her own attack staggering her. While she was occupied, another 200 clones charged her from all sides. She fought like a demon, a whirlwind of ice and steel. Her rapier was a blur, shattering clone after clone. She created blizzards, walls, spikes. For every clone she destroyed, 2 more took its place. They were relentless, creative, and utterly overwhelming. They weren't just a swarm. They were an army, coordinated by a single, brilliant mind. "This is impossible," she snarled, driving her sword through a clone's chest, only for it to disappear in a puff of smoke. "The impossible is just something you haven't seen before," the real Naruto's voice said, right beside her. She spun, swinging her rapier, but he was already gone. He was testing her, analyzing her, picking apart her entire fighting style. He wasn't just fighting her, he was dissecting her. Finally, she had enough. This game was over. She needed to end it. With a roar of fury and exhilaration, she slammed her hands on the ground. The entire pass began to tremble. "You were magnificent, but this ends now." The ice and snow rose up, coalescing, forming into a single, titanic figure, an armored knight of ice, 100 feet tall, its sword a blade of frozen death. It was one of her greatest creations, a move she used to wipe out entire armies. The 1,000 Naruto clones looked up at the ice giant. Then, they all grinned. The real Naruto, standing on a rock outcropping, held out his hand. Wind screamed, and chakra, a violent, visible blue, converged in his palm, rotating at an impossible speed, forming a 4-pointed, shuriken-like disc of pure destructive energy. It shrieked, a sound that tore at the very fabric of the world. Shuriken. He threw it. The spinning blade of wind flew, not at the giant, but at its creator. Esdeath's eyes widened in genuine shock. She had never felt power like this. It wasn't cold or hot, it was just annihilation. She had no time to dodge. She could only throw up her thickest, most desperate ice wall. The Shuriken hit the wall and the world became a symphony of destruction. A dome of swirling wind erupted, filled with billions of microscopic chakra blades that shredded everything on a cellular level. Her ice wall, which could have withstood a catapult barrage for a week, was atomized in less than a second. The shockwaves sent her tumbling back, her uniform torn, small cuts appearing all over her arms and face. The technique had been so powerful, so absolute, it had even dispersed all of his clones. She landed on her feet, breathing heavily, a trickle of blood running from her lip. She tasted it, her own blood. No one had made her bleed in a decade. She looked up, her eyes burning with a feverish light. He was standing where the ice wall had been, untouched. The Shuriken had vanished, its job done. You are, she stammered, at a loss for words. He wasn't done. "You wanted to see my power, General," Naruto said, his voice now low and dangerous. "Fine." A torrent of golden energy exploded from him, a pillar of light that shot into the heavens. His hair seemed to burn. His clothes shifting, a coat of pure, golden chakra forming around him. His skin glowed, and the whisker marks on his cheeks thickened into stark, black lines. The very air vibrated with his power. It wasn't the calm, peaceful energy of the sage. This was a typhoon, a volcano, a tidal wave. It was the power of a demon, tamed and weaponized. This was the golden ghost. He vanished. Not moved, vanished. He appeared in front of her, his speed beyond anything she could track. Before she could even register his presence, he had disarmed her. Her rapier was gone, sent spinning into a snowdrift. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a band of iron. He spun her around, and in a single, fluid motion, had her pinned against a rock wall, one arm held behind her back, his other hand resting gently on her neck. It was a checkmate, a perfect, undeniable defeat. He could snap her neck before she could even think of forming a single icicle. She was completely, utterly at his mercy. And it was the most exhilarating moment of her entire life. She looked over her shoulder, into his glowing, golden eyes. There was no killing intent there. No anger. Just a final, absolute statement of dominance. Strength that only breaks things, he said, his voice a low rumble, is just a tantrum. You could be so much more. He held her there for a heart-stopping second. Then, he let go. He took a step back. The golden aura receded, flowing back into him until he was just a man again, standing in the snow. The game is over, Esdeath, he said, using her name for the first time. He turned his back on her. A gesture of ultimate confidence. Go home. Think about what strength is really for. And with a flicker, a distortion in the air like heat haze, he was gone. Esdeath stood alone in the wrecked mountain pass. Her heart hammering against her ribs. Her three beasts were unconscious. Her uniform was in tatters. She had been humiliated, disarmed, and defeated more completely than ever before in her life. She brought a hand to her neck, where his hand had been. She could still feel the warmth. A slow, dangerous, utterly ecstatic smile spread across her face, lighting up her features. The blood on her lips seemed to sparkle. He had beaten her. He had lectured her. He had dismissed her. He was perfect. Naruto, she whispered, testing the name she'd heard his clones shouting. It felt right on her tongue. Her hunt was over. The courtship had just begun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. An invitation of ice and steel. The echoes of his power faded slowly from the mountain pass, leaving behind a silence broken only by the whistling wind and the groans of her recovering subordinates. Esdeath stood unmoving, her gaze fixed on the spot where he had vanished. The sheer, impossible reality of what had just happened was a fire in her blood, melting the glacial calm she had cultivated for a lifetime. She had been defeated, not merely outfought, but utterly and completely dismantled. Her every strength turned into a weakness, her every strategy rendered obsolete. It was the most wonderful feeling in the world. Lady Esdeath, Liver's voice was strained. He staggered to his feet, clutching his head, his elegant uniform covered in snow. What was that? Niao was still on his knees, trembling, his face pale. The wave of raw, demonic intent he had faced had shaken him to his core. Deidara was beginning to stir, a low growl rumbling in his chest as consciousness returned. They were alive, and by all rights, they shouldn't be. Esdeath finally moved, turning to face them. Her eyes were alight with a terrifying, ecstatic fire. The small cuts on her skin had already sealed themselves with a thin layer of ice, a subconscious use of her own power to mend the damage. That, she said, her voice a low, throbbing purr, was him. She walked over and retrieved her rapier from the snowdrift, her movements fluid and purposeful. There was no shame in her posture, no hint of anger at her defeat. There was only the energized focus of a predator that has finally found a worthy mate. He is not a Taigu user, she continued, her mind racing, replaying every moment of the confrontation. The effortless evasion, the impossible army of clones, the shrieking disk of wind that had unmade her ice wall, the final, overwhelming surge of golden power. This is something else, something older, something purer. He humiliated us, Deidara roared, finally getting to his feet. He looked around at the devastation, the craters, the unconscious bodies of his comrades, the lingering scent of ozone, and his face contorted with rage. Let us track him. We'll hunt him down and tear him apart. Esdeath's head snapped towards him, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that Deidara's breath plumed into a thick cloud of frost. You will do nothing of the sort, she commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. You faced him for less than a minute. I faced his full power. If he had wished it, your atoms would be scattered across this mountain range. His restraint is the only reason you are still breathing. The truth of her words hit them like a physical blow. He hadn't killed them. He had judged them, found them wanting, and brushed them aside like dust. It was a level of contempt more insulting than any wound. So what now, my lady? Liver asked, ever the pragmatist. Oh, our mission was to pacify the north and recruit for the Jaegers. He seems unwilling. Esdeath's lips curved into that slow, dangerous smile. Oh, he will be recruited. But a man of his caliber cannot be broken. He must be courted. She sheathed her rapier. The Prime Minister wants powerful individuals. I have found the most powerful man in the world. I will simply be following my orders. She began walking back towards the coast. her pace brisk and full of renewed purpose. Liver, get on the communicator. I want every Imperial garrison north of the Anning River mobilized. Every road, every pass, every port. I want this entire region blanketed. We are not hunting him. We are extending a formal invitation to the capital. Find where he is staying, surround it, and await my arrival. No one is to engage. No one is to draw a weapon. Is that clear? And if he resists? Liver asked, hurrying to keep pace. Esdeath glanced over her shoulder, the manic light dancing in her eyes. He won't. She knew it with a certainty that settled deep in her bones. He wasn't a coward. He wasn't a man who would hide. He had judged her, and now he would wait for her to make the next move. This wasn't a hunt anymore. It was a game, and she was determined to learn the rules. Naruto sat by a crackling fire in a small, secluded cabin nestled in a valley so remote it didn't appear on any Imperial maps. It was a simple place he'd built himself years ago, a single room with a stone hearth, a bed of packed furs, and shelves filled with dried herbs and smoked meat. It was his sanctuary, and it was about to become his cage. You know, Kurama's voice rumbled in his head, dripping with sarcasm, for a guy who can level a mountain, you picked a terrible place to lie low. It's the only structure for 50 miles. A blind man could find you. Naruto took a sip of hot broth from a wooden bowl. I'm not lying low, Kurama. I'm making a statement. I'm easy to find. I'm not running. She's going to be trouble, the fox warned. That one doesn't just want your power. She wants to own it. She's got the eyes of a starving wolf. I know. Naruto's gaze drifted to the fire. He could feel them. Thousands of them. A net of soldiers, slowly and carefully closing in on his valley. They weren't radiating killing intent. They were nervous, disciplined, and following their orders to the letter. Esdeath's orders. She had taken his measure and adjusted her tactics. Instead of a direct assault, she was using the overwhelming weight of the Empire to corner him. It was smart. So what's the plan? Kurama asked. You can teleport out of here. Or we could give them a little taste of a tailed beast bomb. That would send a message. And kill thousands of soldiers who are just following orders. Naruto countered. Declare war on the entire empire before I've even set foot in their capital. No, that's not the way. The sickness is in the heart of the empire, not in its limbs. I need to go to the source. He finished his broth, placed the bowl on the floor, and stood up. He walked to the single wooden door and pulled on his simple, black traveling cloak. So you're just going to walk out there and surrender? Kurama sounded almost scandalized. It's not a surrender if they're doing exactly what I want them to do, Naruto thought, a grin touching his lips. The best way to figure out how a trap works is to walk right into it. He pushed the door open. The morning air was crisp and cold. The entire ridgeline surrounding his valley was dotted with the silhouettes of Imperial soldiers. Archers with bows drawn, infantrymen with shields locked, but none of them moving. In the center of the valley floor, 100 yards away, stood a single man in the ornate uniform of a captain, flanked by 2 standard bearers. He looked terrified. Naruto walked out of the cabin, letting the door swing shut behind him. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't gather chakra. He just walked forward into the snow, his hands visible, his posture relaxed. The tension in the valley was so thick he could taste it. Thousands of soldiers held their breath. He stopped about 20 feet from the captain. The man was sweating despite the cold. I am C.A. Tane Valerius of the Imperial First Legion. The man announced, his voice trembling slightly but holding its volume. By the authority of General Esdeath, I am to extend you an invitation to accompany her to the Imperial capital. Naruto simply nodded. All right. The captain blinked. The soldiers on the ridge shifted, murmuring in confusion. This was not the reaction they had been briefed to expect. They had been told to prepare for a monster, a demon of the frost. They had been expecting a battle that would shake the heavens. All right. The captain stammered. Yes, Naruto said, his voice calm and reasonable. I'll go. When do we leave? Captain Valerius looked utterly lost. He had 100 contingency plans for resistance, for a fight, for a suicidal last stand. He had 0 plans for polite acceptance. He fumbled with a scroll on his belt. General Esdeath is on her way. She will escort you personally. Good, Naruto said. Saves me the walk. He then did something that completely broke the military tension. He sat down in the snow, cross-legged, and closed his eyes, assuming a meditative pose. "I'll wait here." The captain and his soldiers could only stare. The Golden Ghost, the Northern Anomaly. The man who had single-handedly defeated the three beasts and fought their untouchable general to a standstill, was now sitting in the snow like a monk waiting for a bus. He wasn't their prisoner. He was a guest of honor, patiently waiting for his ride. And in that moment, every soldier in the valley knew, with absolute certainty, who was truly in control. When Esdeath's ship docked, a carriage was waiting, not a prison wagon. It was an opulent affair, paneled with dark lacquerwood and upholstered in rich velvet, drawn by 4 powerful war horses. It was a conveyance for a visiting dignitary, not a captive. Naruto approached it without a guard, Esdeath walking beside him. Her 3 beasts followed at a respectful distance, their expressions a mixture of awe and resentment. "I trust the invitation was to your liking," Esdeath said, her voice a low murmur. "It was a bit loud," Naruto replied, glancing at the legions of soldiers now marching back to their garrisons. But the intent was clear. He opened the carriage door for her, a gesture of old-world courtesy so unexpected it made her pause. He was not intimidated. He was not servile. He was acting as her equal. She got in, and he followed. Sitting on the seat opposite her, the carriage lurched forward, beginning the long journey south. For a long while, they sat in silence, the only sound the right HMIC clopping of hooves and the creak of the leather suspension. Esdeath studied him. He wasn't looking at her, but out the window, watching the frozen landscape roll by. He seemed completely at ease. "You don't fear me," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Should I?" he asked, his gaze still on the window. "Fear is a tool. You use it to control people. But it's useless against someone who isn't interested in being controlled. Every living thing can be controlled," she countered, leaning forward slightly. "It is the fundamental law of nature. The strong rule the weak. The weak are culled, and the species becomes stronger. It is a perfect, elegant system." Naruto finally turned to look at her. His blue eyes were serious. "You see the world as a wolf pack, General. And you see yourself as the alpha. It's a simple philosophy, but it's incomplete." "Oh, then enlighten me, Sage of the Mountains," she purred, a hint of mockery in her tone. "You see a strong tree in a forest," Naruto began, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence. "It stands taller than the others, takes more sunlight, drinks more water. By your logic, its strength comes from its ability to starve the saplings at its feet. To kill them off so it can have all the resources." "Exactly," she confirmed. "It proves its right to live. But what if I told you that's not its true strength?" He continued. "A truly strong tree is one whose branches are so wide they shelter the saplings from the worst of the storms. Its roots are so deep they hold the soil together, preventing it from washing away, giving the other roots something to cling to. It doesn't hoard the resources. It creates an environment where everything around it can grow strong, too. Its strength is not in what it takes, but in what it gives. A4s. T with one strong tree and 1,000 dead saplings is a weak, dying forest. A forest where the strong protect the weak until they can become strong themselves, that is a forest that can survive anything." Esdeath was silent. She stared at him, her brows furrowed. She had never heard anyone frame strength in such a way. It was an alien concept, one that ran counter to every lesson the North had ever taught her. To her, protection was a form of weakness, a sentimentality that led to ruin. But the way he said it, it wasn't a plea for compassion. It was a statement of a different, more complex kind of power. "You speak of a strength I have never witnessed," she admitted, her voice soft. "Then maybe you've been looking in the wrong places," he replied. He leaned back, his point made. "Your empire is a dying forest, Esdeath. Your prime minister is a strong tree, killing everything at his feet. And you are his storm, clearing out whatever he points you at. But soon, there will be nothing left but a wasteland. Is that the legacy you want? To be the strongest thing in a graveyard?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and uncomfortable. She had no answer. For the first time, Mi-1 had challenged her fundamental ideology not by calling it evil, but by calling it inefficient. He had taken her life's philosophy and exposed it as a short-sighted, self-defeating strategy. The rest of the journey was quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet. A thoughtful one. Esdeath found herself watching him, not as a target or a conquest, but as a puzzle she desperately needed to solve. He was a living paradox. A man with the power to shatter the world who spoke of nurturing it. He was the most dangerous man she had ever met, and he hadn't even thrown a punch. The imperial capital was a monument to hypocrisy. Gilded spires and gleaming marble towers scraped the sky, projecting an image of divine authority and unassailable power. But on the ground, it was a different story. Naruto's senses, heightened by sage mode, were assaulted by the reality of the city the moment they passed through the gates. Beneath the opulent facade, he felt a current of human misery so profound it was a physical weight. The cloying scent of expensive perfume barely masked the stench of sewage and despair wafting from the slums. He could feel the stark contrast between the arrogant, self-satisfied emotions of the nobles in their carriages and the gnawing hunger and bitter resentment of the beggars huddled in the alleyways. "This place is rotten to the core," Kurama growled in his mind. "It mocks the land of waves under Gato look like a paradise." "I know," Naruto replied grimly. "It's worse than I thought." Their carriage rolled to a stop before the main entrance of the imperial palace, a structure so large and ornate it was practically a city unto itself. As they disembarked, a group was waiting for them. "Ah, Lady Esdeath, you've returned." A flamboyant man with purple hair and a ridiculously complex uniform stepped forward. He moved with a liquid grace, and his eyes, hidden behind tinted glasses, lingered on Naruto with a disturbing, analytical hunger. "And you've brought us a new toy. How exciting." "Doctor. Stylish," Esdeath said, her tone flat. "This is Naruto. He is not a toy. He is my new right hand." The declaration sent a ripple through the assembled group. Naruto's eyes scanned them, taking their measure in an instant. There was a large man in a strange, masked costume who seemed incredibly shy, shrinking back from the attention. Bowls, he recalled from Esdeath's briefings. A hulking, brutish man with a mechanical jaw who radiated simple-minded bloodlust, likely a tool and nothing more. And then there were three who mattered. A young woman with black hair was devouring a cookie, her expression placid. But Naruto could feel the hollowness inside her, a deep-seated pain masked by a drug-induced calm. This was Kurome. Beside her, a young girl with an almost fanatical gleam in her eyes and mechanical arms stood ramrod straight, a strange, modified dog at her side. Saryu ubiquitous. She radiated a self-righteous certainty that Naruto recognized instantly. The most dangerous kind of zealot. And finally, a young man about his age, with brown hair and an honest face. He looked uncomfortable in his white Jaeger uniform, his posture betraying a simple decency that was wildly out of place here. This was Wave. His eyes met Naruto's, and there was a flicker of surprise and curiosity in them. "So you're the one the general has been talking about," Wave said, stepping forward and offering a hand. "I'm Wave. It's good to meet you." Naruto took his hand, his grip firm and warm. "Naruto. It's good to meet a fellow country boy in the big city." He'd sensed Wave's origins immediately, the salt on the air, the faint rhythm of the sea in his posture. Wave blinked, surprised. "You can tell I'm from the coast." "Something like that," Naruto smiled. In Wave, he saw a reflection of his younger self, a good man trying to do the right thing in a system designed to corrupt him. "Any ally of justice is an ally of mine," Saryu declared, stepping forward and puffing out her chest. Her dog Taigu, Koro, yipped in agreement. "I trust you will help us purge the evil that plagues this great empire." Naruto's smile vanished. He gave her a long, flat look. "Justice and vengeance are two different things, kid. Be careful you don't confuse them." He then turned his back on her, dismissing her completely, and focused on Kurome. He looked at the half-eaten cookie in her hand, then met her vacant eyes. He didn't say a word. He just let his gaze soften with a flicker of something she hadn't seen in a long time, pity. For a fraction of a second, her placid mask cracked, a flick of confusion and pain crossing her features before she looked away, taking another bite of her cookie. Esdeath watched the entire exchange with sharp interest. In less than a minute, Naruto had forged a connection with Wave. Dismissed Saryu's fanaticism, and unsettled Kurome, all without a single threat. He was a master of people, not just of combat. The Prime Minister is waiting, Esdeath announced, gesturing towards the palace doors. He is eager to meet the man who has so captured my attention. The throne room was a cavern of obscene wealth. Gold leaf covered every surface, and priceless SS tapestries depicting glorious imperial victories hung from the walls. At the far end, a young boy with vacant eyes sat on a massive, jewel-encrusted throne. The Emperor. But he was a puppet, and everyone knew it. The real power in the room was the man standing beside the throne, a grossly overweight man in fine silks, his round face fixed in a jovial, greasy smile. Prime Minister Honest. As they approached, Naruto could feel the oppressive web of deceit and corruption that emanated from the man. It was a palpable thing, a slick, oily coating on the air itself. Ah, General Esdeath, and this must be the prodigy from the north. Honest boomed, his voice oozing a false warmth. He waddled forward, his eyes, small and shrewd like a pig's, giving Naruto a swift, calculating appraisal. Magnificent. Truly, the Empire has need of strong men like you to help us preserve order and stamp out the cancerous rebellion that threatens our peaceful way of life. Order is different from control, Minister, Naruto replied, his voice level and devoid of any artifice. One is built on trust, the other on fear. A foundation of fear will always crack. Honest's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. This was not the simple-minded brute he had been expecting. This was a thinking man. A dangerous man. A philosopher. Excellent. Honest chuckled, patting his large belly. We need men of both thought and action. You will be a fine addition to General Esdeath's Jaegers. A powerful new sword to defend His Majesty, the Emperor. He gestured to the boy on the throne, who just stared blankly ahead. Naruto's gaze flickered to the Emperor, then back to Honest. A sword is only as good as the hand that wields it, he said quietly. And it can be pointed in any direction. The veiled threat was so blatant, yet delivered so calmly, that Honest was momentarily speechless. Esdeath, standing beside Naruto, felt a thrill of pride. He was not bowing. He was not cowed. He was standing in the den of the most powerful man in the Empire and challenging him to his face. Before Honest could formulate a suitably oily reply, a servant girl, almost invisible in her anonymity, approached to offer them refreshments. She had ginger hair tied up in a simple bun and a plain, unassuming face. As she offered a tray of drinks to Naruto, her eyes met his for a fraction of a second. And Naruto felt it, a flicker, a well-shielded mind, a core of fierce determination, and the faint, almost imperceptible trace of a Taigu's energy. She was a spy. An assassin. Chelsea, operating under the guise of a palace maid, felt a jolt of alarm. For a single instant, when his blue eyes met hers, she felt seen. Not just noticed, but seen, as if he had peeled back her disguise, her identity, and looked directly at the night raid assassin beneath. It was impossible. Her Taigu, Dia Foundation, was a perfect disguise kit. No one had ever detected her. But this man, he was different. Night Raid had flagged him as a top priority target for observation. A potential threat on par with Esdeath herself. Looking at him now, she thought that might be an understatement. He carried himself with an unnerving stillness, a predatory calm that was nothing like the general's explosive sadism. He was an unknown, a variable that could shatter all of their plans. He took a cup from her tray, his fingers brushing hers. His touch was warm. "Thank you," he said. His voice quiet, and his eyes held hers for a moment longer. It was a clear, silent message. "I know what you are." Chelsea retreated, her heart hammering. She needed to report this. Najinda had to know. This, Naruto, wasn't just a powerful beast Esdeath had found. He was intelligent, perceptive, and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. "Your target is a cell of the Path of Peace," Esdeath explained, standing before a map of the capital's warehouse district. The Jaegers, including Naruto, were gathered in their briefing room. A radical religious group that has escalated from preaching revolution to acts of terrorism. They've been smuggling weapons and are responsible for the bombing of a supply depot last week. Your mission is to infiltrate their headquarters and eliminate them. Seiryu slammed a mechanical fist on the table. "Excellent. We will bring absolute justice to these evildoers," she declared, her dog Koro growling in agreement. Wave looked uneasy. "Eliminate them. All of them. They are enemies of the Empire, Esdeath stated coldly. Their lives are forfeit. Naruto, you will lead the assault. I wish to see how you operate in a team environment. She was testing him, giving him a chance to prove his methods were viable. Naruto just nodded, his expression unreadable. That night, under the cold light of the moon, the Jaegers moved on the warehouse. It was a large, dilapidated building near the docks, reeking of salt and rotting fish. Koro can sniff them out. Saryu whispered eagerly. Then I can use my judgment of the Kings to blow the entrance and we can storm in. No, Naruto said, his voice firm. He closed his eyes for a moment, his head tilted. He was extending his senses, painting a perfect picture of the interior in his mind. 32 targets. 10 are heavily armed in the main congregation hall. The rest are in adjoining rooms. Non-combatants. Women, children. They harbor terrorists. They are evil by association. Saryu hissed. We're not here to kill families. Saryu, Wave shot back, his voice tight with anger. Enough, Naruto commanded, his authority cutting through their argument. We are not leveling the building. We are not going in loud. We are going to capture the combatants and secure the civilians. Is that clear? Saryu looked ready to protest, but a cold glare from Esdeath, who was observing from a nearby rooftop, silenced her. How? Kurome asked, her voice a monotone. They're armed and entrenched. Naruto smiled. With a better plan. He made the familiar cross-shaped hand sign. In an instant, 200 shadow clones appeared around them, silent and ready. The Jaegers, except for Esdeath, stumbled back in shock. Gods above, Wave breathed. All right, here's the plan, Naruto said. His clones already beginning to move with silent, coordinated precision. Group 1, you're on the roof. Smoke pellets down the ventilators on my signal. Group 2, you'll breach the north and west walls simultaneously. Group 3, you're with me at the main entrance. Everyone else, form a perimeter. Non-lethal takedowns only. Use the training kunai and suppression tactics. Wave, Kurome, you're with me. Saryu, you and Koro stay here and secure anyone who runs out. Do not, under any circumstances, use lethal force. Move out. The clones dispersed with terrifying speed and efficiency. Naruto, flanked by a shell-shocked Wave and a silently curious Kurome, moved to the front entrance. On his mental command, smoke pellets dropped into the warehouse. Shouts of confusion and alarm erupted from within. Seconds later, crashes echoed from the sides of the building as the clone teams breached the walls. Now, Naruto said, and kicked the main doors off their hinges. They stormed into a large hall filled with thick smoke and panicked shouting. Figures were firing blindly into the gloom. But they weren't being met with return fire. They were being met by a swarm of silent, efficient phantoms. Naruto moved like a dancer in the chaos. He flowed past a man swinging a sword, tapping him precisely on the neck with 2 fingers. The man's eyes rolled back and he collapsed. He plucked a gun from another's hand, disassembled it in a blur of motion, and swept the man's legs out from under him. Wave, caught up in the momentum, found himself using his grand chariot armor defensively. Blocking stray bullets and subduing extremists with punches, his instinct screaming at him to follow Naruto's lead. Kurome, for her part, moved like a ghost, her blade a blur, but she was using the flat of it. Knocking people out with precise, brutal efficiency, a flicker of something new in her eyes as she fought without the intent to kill. The combatants in the path of peace were fanatics, but they were amateurs. They were facing an army of elite special forces soldiers, all with the face and skills of one man, led by the original, who was on an entirely different level. It was over in 3 minutes. All 22 armed members were bound and unconscious on the floor. Not a single person, Jaeger or extremist, had been killed. The civilian families were huddled together, terrified but unharmed, being calmly reassured by a handful of Naruto's clones. The Jaegers regrouped outside, breathing heavily. That was incredible, Wave said, looking at Naruto with unadulterated admiration. No casualties. On either side, Saryu was practically vibrating with fury. They are evil. They deserve to die for their crimes. This is not justice. This is a victory, Naruto stated, walking past her. And it's a cleaner one than you could have ever managed. It was in this moment of success, as the team relaxed their guard, that the air shifted. From the shadows of a nearby alley, a figure blurred. It was Chelsea, her Gia foundation transforming her appearance into that of a nondescript dockworker. Her target was clear: Kurome, the puppet master, a critical Jaeger to eliminate. She had been waiting for a moment of distraction, and this was it. Her hand shot out, a long, thin Senbon needle coated in a lethal, fast-acting poison aimed directly for the exposed nape of Kurome's neck. She was fast, faster than any normal human. But Naruto's senses, which had been passively tracking her presence for the last hour, flared to life. He didn't shout. He didn't even turn his head. He just moved. In the fraction of a second it took for the needle to travel the last few inches to Kurome's skin, a golden flash intercepted it. Naruto appeared as if from thin air, his body between Chelsea and her target. He caught her wrist in an iron grip, the Senbon stopping a millimeter from his own neck. Chelsea's eyes widened in pure shock. He had been on the other side of the group. It was impossible for him to have moved that fast. The Jaegers spun around, weapons drawn, their post-mission calm shattered. Wave's eyes were wide with horror at how close Kurome had come to death. Seryu's face was a mask of murderous rage, her cannons already powering up. Esdeath, on the rooftop, leaned forward, a razor-sharp smile on her face. Chelsea dropped her disguise, her ginger hair and familiar assassin's outfit reappearing. She was caught. Naruto held her wrist, his grip unbreakable. He looked from her shocked face to the enraged Jaegers, and then to Kurome, who was staring at him, her usual apathy replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. He stood in the tense silence, the captured Night Raid assassin in his grasp, a living shield between two mortal enemies. His expression was utterly, terrifyingly unreadable. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Captive, the Queen, and the Sage. The world snapped into a tableau of deadly intent. Chelsea's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own making. The cold, unyielding pressure of Naruto's grip on her wrist was the only thing anchoring her to reality. Before her, the Jaegers were a gallery of reactions. Wave's hand was on the hilt of his sword, his face a mask of shocked indecision. Kurome stared, her perpetually placid expression finally broken by a sliver of raw, unreadable emotion. Was it fear? Gratitude? Bowles had instinctively raised his flamethrower, a lumbering beast ready to defend its own. But the true danger was Seryu, enemy of the Empire, Night Raid scum. She shrieked, her face a twisted caricature of righteous fury. The cannons in her mechanical arms whirred, glowing with stored energy. You dare attempt to harm one of our own. For this, you will receive the ultimate judgment. Die. Stand down, Seryu. Naruto's voice was dangerously quiet, but it cut through her fanaticism like a razor. He didn't even look at her. His gaze was locked on Chelsea, a silent, probing assessment that was more unnerving than any threat. She is evil. She must be purged, Seryu insisted, taking a step forward. Koro, her Taigu dog, mirrored her, its jaws parting in a snarl that morphed its cartoonish face into something monstrous. I said, Naruto repeated, his voice dropping an octave, becoming something that resonated in the bones. Stand down. He shifted his gaze to Seryu. For a split second, his blue eyes bled into the cold, slitted red of the predator she had been warned about. It wasn't a flare of golden energy, it was a subtle, terrifying shift. A silent promise of absolute annihilation. The air grew heavy, thick with a pressure that felt like the bottom of the ocean. It was the same killing intent that had buckled Nao's knees in the mountains, but here, in the close confines of the docks, it was suffocating. Seryu froze. Her programming, her fanaticism, her absolute belief in her own justice, all of it stuttered to a halt in the face of that impossibly ancient and overwhelming will. Her body trembled, not from rage, but from a primal, instinctual fear. This man was not just a powerful warrior. He was a natural disaster in human form. From the rooftop above, Esdeath watched, a slow, predatory smile gracing her lips. This was magnificent. The defiance, the effortless command. He had taken control of her Jaegers without even raising his voice. She leapt from the roof, landing as silent, as a snowflake on the cobblestones behind her team. Her presence immediately solidified the chain of command. He is right, Seryu, Esdeath said, her voice laced with amusement. Stand down. The show is just getting interesting. She sauntered forward, her high-heeled boots clicking with arrogant confidence. Her eyes, glowing with possessive fire, raked over Chelsea. Well, look what the cat dragged in. A little mouse from Night Raid, trying to poach from my larder. Chelsea's training took over. She tried to wrench her wrist free, to create distance, to find an escape route. Naruto's grip was absolute. It wasn't crushing. It was simply immovable, like trying to fight a mountain. Give her to me, Naruto, Esdeath purred, stopping directly in front of him. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. She tried to kill Kurone. She tried to kill one of mine. It is only fitting that I get to play with her. I have so many new techniques for extracting information I've been dying to try. The promise of torture hung in the air, a scent of blood and ice. Wave flinched. Kurone looked away, her expression returning to its neutral mask, but her hand strayed to the back of her neck, where the needle had been aimed. Naruto didn't react to Esdeath's touch. He looked from her hungry eyes to Chelsea's defiant, terrified face. He saw her resolve, the hard-won pragmatism, of a soldier who knew she was going to die and was determined to do it without screaming. He saw a mirror, cracked and distorted, of people he had known. Of himself. No, he said. The single word drive, opt into the silence like a stone into a frozen lake. Esdeath's hand froze on his jaw. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, cold disbelief. What did you just say to me? She asked, her voice dangerously soft. I said no, Naruto repeated, his own voice calm and unwavering. He finally released Chelsea's wrist, only to step in front of her, creating a physical barrier between her and Esdeath. She is my captive. I caught her. By the rules of engagement, her disposition is my responsibility. You are my subordinate. Esdeath's voice rose, the temperature dropping sharply. Frost B. Egan to spiderweb across the cobblestones at her feet. And you are in my unit. You have no authority here but what I grant you. She is a terrorist who attacked my people. She belongs to me. She's more valuable alive than dead. Naruto countered, meeting her furious gaze without flinching. His calmness was an infuriating wall against her tidal wave of anger. Your techniques will get you a screaming mess and a pile of lies before she dies. She's a professional. She's trained to resist that. Then what do you propose? Esdeath hissed. We let her go. Give her a medal for trying. I propose I get the truth from her. Naruto said. Her organization, her contacts, her targets, all of it. Give me 3 days. If I can't get what we need by then, you can have what's left. It was an audacious gambit. A direct challenge to her authority, wrapped in the guise of a logical, strategic alternative. He wasn't just defying her. He was claiming he could succeed where she would fail. Esdeath's eyes narrowed into slits of pure ice. Her power began to radiate from her in palpable waves, a crushing aura of cold and death. You are on thin ice, Naruto. Thinner than you can possibly imagine. Give her to me now. The Jaegers took a step back. They knew this stage of their general's anger. It was the precursor to an execution. Naruto didn't budge. He held her gaze, his own expression one of absolute, unshakable certainty. He was not asking. He was telling her how it was going to be. This was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of his own sovereignty. They stood there for a long, silent moment. A battle of wills waged in the space between them. Her power, born of sadism and a belief in absolute domination, crashed against his, a quiet, fathomless ocean of resolve forged in 2 lifetimes of unimaginable conflict. And her power broke. She couldn't do it. She couldn't strike him down. The thought of harming him, of destroying this magnificent, defiant man who was the only thing in the world that truly interested her, was an agony. But backing down in front of her troops was a humiliation. She needed an out, an excuse that would preserve her pride. And then she saw it. She looked at Chelsea, still standing behind Naruto, and her possessive, obsessive mind found the solution. Esdeath's furious expression slowly melted away, replaced by a smile that was somehow more terrifying. It was a smile of ownership. Very well, she said, the sudden shift in tone startling everyone. She reached past Naruto and cupped Chelsea's chin, her thumb stroking the assassin's skin. Chelsea flinched but held her ground. 3 days. But let's be clear, Naruto. She is not your captive. Her eyes locked with his. She is ours. With that, she turned on her heel and strode away. Jaegers, mission complete. Return to base. Seryu, take the prisoners to the interrogation block. The rest of you are dismissed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had reframed his defiance as a joint decision. He hadn't taken something from her. He had acquired a new asset for them. A new pet for them to share. It was a masterful political sidestep, and it left Naruto standing in the quiet dock. Yards with a captured assassin who now looked at him with a mixture of terror and profound confusion. He had saved her from torture and death, but in doing so, he had just painted an even bigger target on her back. The room Naruto had been assigned in the Jaeger barracks was Spartan but spacious. He sat on a simple wooden chair, watching Chelsea, who was perched warily on the edge of the room's only bed. He had dismissed the guards Esdeath had sent, placing a simple, invisible chakra barrier over the door and window. It was more effective than any lock or sentry. He had removed the small arsenal of poisoned needles, garrots, and concealed blades she had hidden on her person with a dispassionate efficiency that told her he knew exactly where to look. Now, she was unarmed, but she was far from helpless. Her sharpest weapon was her mind. "You're a fool," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was sharp, cynical. "You think you saved me. All you did was make me Esdeath's personal project. The moment your 3 days are up, she's going to peel me apart layer by layer, and she's going to enjoy it even more now." Naruto finished wiping one of her poison-laced senbon clean with a cloth and set it aside. "She won't get the chance." "Oh, really?" Chelsea scoffed. "And why's that? You think you can stop her? You work for her. You're her pet monster, her new favorite toy. I saw the way she looks at you." "I don't work for her," Naruto said calmly, finally looking up. "And I'm not a toy. I'm here to see the rot in the Empire firsthand. And to cut it out." Chelsea laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Is that what you call it? You've joined the Jaegers, the minister's personal death squad, and you call that cutting out the rot? You're wading deeper into the sewer and calling it a bath. You're no different than them. Is that what you think?" Naruto asked. He stood up and walked to the small table where a pitcher of water and 2 cups sat. He poured a cup and held it out to her. "You think Night Raid is any different?" She eyed the cup with suspicion, but her throat was dry. She took it. "We're fighting for the people. To liberate them from a corrupt tyrant. And what happens after you kill Honest? After you kill the Emperor?" Naruto pressed, his voice still quiet, but with an intensity that demanded an answer. "Who takes over?" "Najanda, some general from the Revolutionary Army. You'll trade one tyrant for another, and the cycle will start all over again. The new boss will purge the old boss's loyalists. The old loyalists will form a new rebellion. More war, more death, more orphans who grow up filled with hatred and a desire for revenge. Have you even thought that far ahead?" His words struck a nerve. Chelsea had seen the infighting within the Revolutionary Army, the jockeying for power. The ruthless pragmatism that often looked a lot like the Empire's cruelty. She had pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the immediate enemy. "You have to break the system," she argued. "It's the only way." "No," Naruto said, his eyes distant, as if he were looking at a ghost from a half-forgotten life. "You don't have to break the system. You have to break the idea that created the system. The idea that power gives you the right to hurt people. That strength is for dominating, not protecting. That revenge is the same thing as justice." He looked at her, his expression filled with a weariness that seemed impossibly old. "I once knew a boy who saw his whole world destroyed. He decided that the only way to make people understand the pain of war was to inflict that pain on everyone. He wanted to create a weapon so terrible it would scare the world into peace. He thought he was creating justice. But all he was creating was a bigger cycle of pain." Chelsea stared at him. He wasn't talking about anyone in this world. He was talking about himself, about his past. She had assumed his power was a taigu, a freak mutation. But his words, they spoke of a history she couldn't comprehend. "Who are you?" she whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. Naruto gave a small, sad smile. "I'm a man who has seen this story before. And I'm trying to write a different ending this time." He sat back down. "I'm not going to ask you for your secrets, Chelsea. I'm not going to torture you. I'm going to show you a third option. A path that isn't the Empire's and isn't Night Raid's. There is no third option, She shot back, her cynicism a shield. There wasn't, he corrected her gently. But there is now. Over the next 2 days, a strange routine developed. Naruto treated her not as a prisoner, but as a reluctant guest. He brought her meals himself, simple, hearty food. He talked to her, not about night raids bases or her comrades' identities, but about ideas. He spoke of villages that governed themselves, of leaders chosen by their people, of armies that existed only to defend, not to conquer. He dismantled her arguments one by one. When He spoke of the necessity of assassination, he spoke of the poison it sowed, turning allies against each other in fear and paranoia. When she spoke of liberating the people, he asked what freedom meant. If they were just trading one master for another. He didn't preach, he questioned. He forced her to examine the foundations of her own beliefs, and she found them to be frighteningly brittle. Esdeath was a frequent, disruptive presence. She would appear at the door, her expression a mix of jealousy and fascination, and inject herself into their conversations. Such idealistic nonsense, she sneered one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe as Naruto explained the concept of a council of elders. People don't want to choose. They want to be led. They want a strong leader to tell them what to do, to protect them from their enemies. It is the natural order. It's the order of the lazy and the cowardly, Chelsea retorted, her wit as sharp as any blade. Or is that the only kind of person you can rule, General? The ones who are too scared to think for themselves. Esdeath's eyes flashed. You have a viper's tongue, little mouse. I should cut it out. And prove her point. Naruto interjected calmly. He looked at Esdeath. Her methods are wrong, but her goal is the same as yours. Both women stared at him in disbelief. What? They said in unison. She wants a strong world, Naruto explained, looking at Chelsea. And you, he said, turning to Esdeath, want a strong world. You just disagree on the definition of strong. You think strength is a mountain, standing alone. She thinks it's a wildfire, burning everything down to start over. I'm telling you both that true strength is a forest, where every tree supports the others. He was mediating a philosophical debate between his captor and his captive. It was insane, and yet, it was working. Esdeath, for all her sadism, was intelligent. She found herself drawn into the arguments, defending her worldview with a ferocity she usually reserved for the battlefield. Chelsea, in turn, found herself arguing not just against Esdeath's tyranny, but against Naruto's challenging ideas. They were a volatile, impossible trio, the sage, the queen, and the assassin. Locked in a room, debating the fate of a world that none of them were truly satisfied with. And in the crucible of that room, a strange, unspoken respect began to form between the two women. Born of sharp intellect and a shared, baffling focus on the man at the center of it all. On the morning of the third day, a frantic summons came from the Prime Minister's office. There are reports from the southern provinces, Esdeath announced, her expression grim as she stood in Naruto's doorway. Chelsea was there, listening. By now, her presence was simply accepted. Strange mutations among the danger beasts. They're becoming more aggressive, more intelligent. They wiped out an entire reconnaissance platoon near the ruins of Bornea. Honest wants me to handle it. Naruto's head snapped up. His sage mode, which was always humming just beneath his skin, felt a prickle of unease from the south. A sour, twisted energy that felt wrong. It's that feeling from the mountains, Kurama warned from within. But stronger, more concentrated. We're going, Naruto said. It wasn't a request. Esdeath raised an eyebrow. We are. You need to see this, Naruto insisted. Both of you. He looked at Chelsea. You're an expert on the unusual. Your input could be valuable. Chelsea was shocked. He was inviting her on a mission. Esdeath's eyes narrowed, a flicker of Usy crossing her face before it was replaced by cold calculation. Fine, Esdeath conceded. The mouse can come, but she will be collared. The journey south was made by military air skiff, a fast ing vessel that skimmed a few hundred feet above the ground. The landscape changed from the manicured fields of the capital's environs to a wilder, more untamed jungle. As they approached the Bornea region, the wrongness became palpable. The trees were twisted into unnatural shapes, their leaves a sickly, blackish green. The air was heavy and silent. There were no birds, no insects. This place feels dead. Wave muttered from his post at the skiff's railing. He and Kurome had been assigned to the mission as backup. It's not dead, Naruto said, his eyes closed in concentration. It's sick. He landed near the reported site of the massacre. The scene was gruesome. The bodies of the Imperial soldiers were torn apart, but not in a way consistent with any known danger beast. They looked dissolved. Parts of their bodies melted into the corrupted soil. What could do this? Kurome asked, her voice a whisper. Chelsea knelt, examining the ground. She was an expert in poisons and biological agents. This isn't a poison I recognize. It's more like a hyper-aggressive acid, but it's organic. It's like the very ground is trying to digest them. Naruto ignored the bodies. His senses were drawn to something else. A pull, a cold, dark spot in the vibrant tapestry of natural energy. It was coming from a nearby cliff face, hidden behind a curtain of thick, black vines. This way, he said, starting toward it. Esdeath followed immediately, her curiosity piqued. She created a blade of ice and slashed through the vines, revealing a dark opening in the rock. A cave entrance, but the stone around it was carved with strange, non-human patterns. It was a temple, an ancient one. As they stepped inside, the sick feeling intensified. The air was cold and stale, and a profound sense of dread settled over them. The walls were covered in elaborate carvings, illuminated by the light from Esdeath's glowing ice sword. The carvings told a story. It began with a world teeming with life, vibrant and wild. Then, it showed a swirling vortex of darkness descending from the heavens. A formless, multi-limbed entity of pure chaos. In the next panel, this entity was depicted consuming everything: mountains, forests, oceans. It was not conquering, it was eating. The first calamity, Chelsea breathed, recognizing the term from a fragment of a legend she had once read in a forbidden text. A creation. Myth about the origin of all danger beasts. The final panels were the most disturbing. They showed a group of godlike figures fighting the calamity. They couldn't kill it. Instead, they shattered it. The carvings depicted the entity breaking into thousands of glittering shards, which rained down upon the world. The largest of these shards grew into monstrous beasts, the progenitors of the Taigu. Smaller ones simply seeped into the earth, poisoning it. The Taigu, Wave said in awe. They're fragments of this thing. Naruto wasn't looking at the carvings. He was staring at the center of the temple. A low, stone altar sat there, and the sour energy was pouring from it like a faucet. His sage mode was screaming at him, the natural energy recoiling from the altar as if from a void. He stepped closer, and the reaction became violent. His body seized, and for a terrifying second, the sage markings on his face appeared. Not calm and orange, but a corrupted, sickly black. He gasped, staggering back, clutching his head. Kit, get away from there. Kurama roared in his mind, his own chakra flaring to protect his host. That's it. That's the source. It's an echo of a power far older and more hateful than Kagaya's. She wanted to enslave the world. This thing wants to eat it. And all this bloodshed, this war, it's like a dinner bell. It's waking up. Naruto straightened, his breathing ragged. The black markings faded. He looked at Esdeath and Chelsea, his face grim. The civil war isn't the real problem, he said, his voice heavy with the terrible weight of his discovery. It's the appetizer. They left the temple in a grim silence, the implications of what they had seen settling upon them. The war they were all fighting was meaningless. They were all just bacteria squabbling on a petri dish. Oblivious to the scientist about to sterilize the whole experiment. They made camp a few miles from the temple, the mood somber. Wave and Kurome kept watch, leaving the central trio around their own campfire. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken thoughts. Chelsea looked at Naruto, who was staring into the flames, his face a mask of deep, troubled thought. She saw the truth now. His strange parables, his talk of a third path, his weariness, it all clicked into place. He wasn't just trying to stop a war. He was trying to stop the end of the world. Her own mission, her loyalty to Night Raid, their goal of killing the Prime Minister, it all seemed so small now. So pointless. Esdeath, for her part, was wrestling with a new, unwelcome emotion, fear. Not for herself, but for the world she so enjoyed dominating. What was the point of being the strongest if there was nothing left to be strong in? This calamity, this world eater, it was a concept that threatened the very foundation of her philosophy. It wasn't a rival to be defeated, it was a context that rendered her life's work meaningless. And the only person who seemed to understand it, the only one who had felt its power and stood back up, was the man sitting across the fire from her. Her gaze shifted to Chelsea. She saw the look on the assassin's face, the dawning comprehension, the flicker of awe. The way Chelsea was looking at her Naruto. A fresh wave of jealous, possessive anger surged through her, hot and sharp, overriding the cosmic dread. This little mouse was getting too close. She was sharing in a discovery that should have been theirs alone. Esdeath stood up, her movement fluid and deadly. "The 3 days are up," she said, her voice a low growl. She drew her rapier, its tip glowing with a faint blue light. "He showed you his path. Did it convince you to talk?" Chelsea looked up at her, then at Naruto, then back at Esdeath. She didn't scramble for a weapon. She didn't rise to a defensive crouch. The old Chelsea would have. The pragmatic assassin would have seen the unwinnable fight and tried to take one of them with her. But she wasn't the old Chelsea anymore. The last 3 days, culminating in the horrifying revelation in the temple, had irrevocably changed her. Night Raid's war was a child's squabble. Naruto's war was the only one that mattered. Esdeath took a step forward, her rapier leveled at Chelsea's throat. "I asked you a question, Mouse. Are you with us, or are you just dead weight?" Chelsea met her icy gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only a startling, newfound clarity. She ignored the blade at her throat and turned her full attention to Naruto. She didn't plead for her life. She didn't try to bargain. She asked a simple question that would change everything. "What do we do next?" The words hung in the jungle air, a quiet declaration of allegiance more powerful than any oath. She wasn't asking as a prisoner. She was asking as a partner. She had chosen a side. Not the Empire. Not Night Raid. She had chosen his. Esdeath froze, her rapier a half-inch from Chelsea's neck. Her mind, so adept at understanding violence and domination, struggled to process this. This wasn't submission. This wasn't defiance. It was recruitment. The little mouse had just enlisted in Naruto's one-man army. She looked from Chelsea's resolute face to Naruto's calm, accepting one. And in that moment, Esdeath realized with a jolt of shocking clarity that she was no longer just a general courting a powerful man. She was part of something more. Something complicated. She was standing in a firelit jungle, with her greatest rival and her greatest obsession, on the precipice of a war for the very soul of the world. And she was no longer the one giving all the orders. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Birth of the Maelstrom. The fire crackled, oblivious to the momentous shift that had just occurred. Esdeath held her rapier steady, the killing frost that coated its edge a mere breath from Chelsea's throat. Her mind reeled. The assassin's simple question, "What do we do next?" had detonated the entire dynamic between them. It was a surrender, but not to her. It was a pledge of fealty to him. Chelsea hadn't been broken, she had been converted. Naruto looked from Chelsea's face, etched with newfound purpose, to Esdeath's, a storm of confusion, jealousy, and a reluctant, dawning understanding. He knew this was the turning point. The moment to pivot from observation to action. He stood up, his movement deliberate, drawing both women's attention. He gently placed his hand over Esdeath's, his fingers closing over her grip on the rapier. His touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold steel. "She's with us now, Esdeath," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Lower your sword." For a heart-stopping second, Esdeath resisted. The urge to simply kill the redhead, to eliminate the new rival for his attention, was a powerful, primal instinct. It was the northern way. It was her way. But his touch, his voice, and the undeniable logic of the situation warred against it. They had just discovered a world-ending threat. Petty jealousy was a luxury they could no longer afford. More than that, he had asked her. He hadn't commanded or threatened. He had made a request, as an equal. With a low hiss of frustration that was half growl, half sigh, she relented. The rapier lowered, and the killing frost dissipated. She had yielded to his will again, but this time, it felt less like a defeat and more like a concession to a partner. "Fine," she clipped out, pulling her hand away from his as if burned. "She's with us, but if she betrays you, betrays us, I will personally render her down into a fine red mist. I wouldn't expect anything less, Chelsea replied, her voice cool. Though a flicker of relief passed through her eyes. She stood up, brushing dirt from her pants. So, the world is ending, the empire is rotten, and the revolution is a snake eating its own tail. We have one demigod, one sadist general, and one reformed assassin. It's a terrible start for a new faction. I love it. What do we call ourselves? Naruto looked between the two of them, Esdeath. Radiating possessive power and barely contained violence. Chelsea, her cynical exterior now overlaying a core of sharp, focused intelligence. Fire and ice, the sword and the scalpel. And him, the whirlwind at the center. Maelstrom, Naruto said, the name coming to him with perfect clarity. A force of nature that draws everything in and churns it into something new. We're not here to conquer or destroy. We're here to change everything. Esdeath tested the word on her tongue. Maelstrom. A slow, dangerous smile crept back onto her face. It was a name that promised chaos, power, and overwhelming force. It suited her. I like it. Their return to the capital was not as three individuals, but as the nascent core of a new power. Their first stop was not the Jaeger barracks, but the grand, opulent heart of the beast, the imperial palace. Prime Minister Honest was in his private chambers, gorging himself on a roasted suckling pig, when the doors were thrown open without a prior announcement. He looked up, his greasy face contorting with annoyance, which quickly morphed into surprise when he saw who it was. Esdeath, radiating a cold fury. Naruto, his expression as calm and implacable as a stone wall. And, to his utter shock, the captured Night Raid assassin, Chelsea, walking beside them not as a prisoner, but as an equal. General, what is the meaning of this intrusion? Honest blustered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. And why is that terrorist not in chains? She is under my protection now, Minister, Naruto stated, his voice echoing in the chamber. And, we are here to inform you of a change in management. Honest's piggy eyes narrowed. I don't know what game you're playing, you northern savage, but you are treading on very dangerous ground. The ground is more dangerous than you know. Esdeath cut in, her voice dripping with contempt. We found a temple in the southern ruins. One that speaks of a first calamity. A world eater that your little war is helping to awaken. Honest froze, a piece of meat halfway to his mouth. A flicker of something that wasn't surprise, but recognition, and fear, crossed his features. Nonsense. Old wives' tales. The ravings of dead primitives. We felt its power, Minister, Naruto said. The danger beast mutations are just the beginning. Your corruption, the bloodshed of the civil war, you are ringing the dinner bell for a god of destruction. And you're too busy stuffing your face to even notice. And so, Chelsea added, stepping forward with a predatory smile of her own, we're taking matters into our own hands. Consider this our formal resignation from the Jaegers. Resignation. Honest sputtered, his face turning a blotchy purple. He was losing control, and he hated it. You cannot resign. You serve the Empire. You serve me. No, Naruto corrected him. We serve the people of the Empire. And its greatest enemy right now is not the Revolutionary Army. It's you. He pointed a finger directly at the Prime Minister. Your corruption is the poison that's fueling this calamity. So we're going to cut you out. Not your office, not the Emperor. Just you and your network of parasites. We will dismantle your political machine. Piece by piece. We will seize your ill-gotten wealth. We will expose every dirty secret you have. We are not rebels, Minister. We are reformers. Loyal reformers, dedicate to purging the true enemies of the Empire. It was a masterstroke of political warfare, a concept Chelsea had helped him refine on the journey back. They weren't declaring war on the Empire, which old have united the entire military against them. They were declaring war on him, framing it as an act of loyalty to the throne. It drove a wedge between Honest and the traditionalist factions of the military who served the Emperor. Not the Minister. Honest was simultaneously furious and terrified. You think you can challenge me? I am the Empire. I will have you all branded as traitors and hunted down like dogs. Esdeath laughed, a sound like shattering glaciers. You can try, you fat pig. You can send your armies, your assassins, your pet officials. We will break them, and we will take everything from you. By the time we are done, you will be left with nothing but your own pathetic fear. With that, They turned and walked out, leaving the Prime Minister speechless and trembling with age so profound it was almost apoplectic. He had just been openly threatened in his own sanctuary, his power challenged, his life's work declared forfeit. And the worst part, he knew they had the power to do it. The news of their declaration spread through the capital like wildfire. Rumors flew. General Esdeath had finally turned on the minister. The mysterious Golden Ghost was a loyalist reformer. A new faction had been born. The capital, already a hotbed of intrigue, was thrown into utter chaos. Maelstrom needed a base, a fortress from which to wage their new war. Esdeath knew of the perfect place. A defunct imperial fortress carved into the heart of a mountain range 200 miles east of the capital. It was strategically located, easily defensible, and had been decommissioned years ago, largely forgotten. They arrived with a small contingent of soldiers personally loyal to Esdeath, men and women who had served under her for years and whose loyalty was to her, not the corrupt government. The fortress, called Sky Throne Citadel, was a marvel of old-world engineering. Perched high on a mountain peak, accessible only by a single, winding road and a series of heavy gates, it was a near-impregnable bastion. As they began the process of reactivating its defenses and establishing their command, Naruto felt a familiar presence approaching. He walked to the main parapet and looked down the winding road. A lone figure was making his way up the path. Brown hair, a Jaeger uniform he wore with an air of profound discomfort. Wave. Naruto went down to the main gate alone. Wave stopped when he saw him. His expression a mixture of desperation and resolve. "I heard what you did," Wave said, his voice strained. "In the throne room. Is it true? You're fighting the Prime Minister." "We're fighting the corruption," Naruto corrected him, honest as just the head of the snake. Wave clenched his fists. "The things I've seen, the missions since you left, they had us put down a food riot. Unarmed civilians, just starving. And Seryu," he trailed off, shaking his head. "I can't do it anymore. I joined the Navy to protect my hometown. I became a Jaeger to protect the Empire. But this isn't protection. This is just being a boot on the neck of the poor." He looked Naruto in the eye, his own gaze pleading. "Is what you said true? That you're trying to build something better? A place where the strong protect the weak?" Quote. Naruto recognized the crossroads Wave stood at. The same one he had faced so many times in his first life. The moment a good soldier realizes he's fighting for the wrong side. "That's the goal," Naruto said simply. Wave unstrapped his Taigu, Grand Chariot, from his back and set it on the ground. He unbuckled his sword belt. "Then I'm with you, not as a Jaeger, just as a man who wants to do the right thing." Naruto smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He clapped Wave on the shoulder. "Welcome to Maelstrom, Wave. We can use a man like you." The defection of a Jaeger, even one, was a massive political victory. It lent their cause legitimacy. But they needed more than legitimacy, they needed resources. And Chelsea knew exactly where to get them. "Honest's entire political machine runs on off-the-books money," she explained, standing over a large map in the fortress's command center. Naruto, Esdeath, and Wave were gathered around. Bribes, extortion, but his biggest source of liquid capital is a massive smuggling ring run by one of his cousins, Ogre. They deal in everything: weapons, drugs, artifacts, and people. She pointed to a location on the coast. "This is their central hub. A fortified port disguised as a merchant consortium. They move hundreds of slaves through there a month, shipping them to nobles in the capital and foreign buyers. It's disgusting, and it's profitable. If we hit it, we not only free those people, but we can seize enough wealth to fund our operations for a year. It's also where Ogre, the head of Honest's secret police, has his headquarters." Esdeath's eyes lit up. "A fortified port, a fight and a treasure chest. I approve. It's heavily guarded," Chelsea warned. "Ogre is a sadist, but he's not stupid. He has a private army and at least one Taigu user on his staff." "Good," Naruto said, his knuckles cracking. "Let's give them a demonstration of what Maelstrom can do." The attack was a three-pronged masterpiece of strategy and overwhelming force. Phase 1 belonged to Chelsea. Using her Gia foundation, she spent 2 days infiltrating the port city, disguised as a clerk. She mapped guard rotations, located Ogre's headquarters, identified the location of the slave pens, and, most importantly, sabotaged their primary alarm system. Phase 2 belonged to Esdeath. Under the cover of a moonless night, she approached the port from the sea. Standing on a massive platform of her own ice, she raised her hands. The temperature of the water around the harbor plummeted. With a deafening crack, she froze the entire bay solid, trapping every ship in port and creating a solid wall of ice that cut off any escape by sea. It was a show of power so immense it bordered on the divine. Phase 3 belonged to Naruto. As the alarm that Chelsea had not sabotaged finally rang out, Ogre's private army scrambled to the walls, expecting an attack from the land. They were met with a terrifying sight. 1,000 golden-haired warriors, appearing from the shadows of the forest in perfect, silent unison. The battle for the outer walls was over before it began. Naruto's shadow clone army swarmed the defenses, their Numbe RS and coordinated tactics completely overwhelming the terrified guards. They used non-lethal force, a wave of precise strikes and overwhelming numbers that neutralized the entire perimeter guard in minutes. While his clones sowed chaos, the real Naruto, along with Wave and Esdeath, made a beeline for the center of the city. Their target, Ogre himself. They found him in the main square, a brutishly large man with a face like a bulldog, screaming at his panicked soldiers. Beside him stood another man, thin and weaselly, holding a strange, whip-like taigu. "You," Ogre roared when he saw them. "Who dares attack me? I am the Prime Minister's cousin." "That's why we're here," Naruto said calmly. The whip wielder lashed out, his taigu extending like a striking snake. Wave, his grand chariot now gleaming under the moonlight, leapt in front of Naruto, his armored form taking the blow with a loud clang. "I've got him," Wave said, a determined grin on his face. He charged forward, his spear claw, shing with the whip in a shower of sparks. For the first time, he was fighting for a cause he believed in, and it showed in his power. That left Ogre for Esdeath and Naruto. "He's mine," Esdeath purred, her rapier appearing in her hand. "I want to hear him beg." "He's all yours," Naruto agreed, and vanished. While Esdeath toyed with the terrified Ogre, her ice attacks slowly and cruelly disabling him, Naruto appeared at the slave pens. The massive iron doors were locked tight. He placed a hand on the door, channeled a small, controlled Rasengan into the lock mechanism, and it disintegrated into dust. He threw the doors open. Inside, hundreds of people, men, women, and children from all corners of the empire, cowered in the darkness, their faces etched with fear and despair. Naruto's golden chakra flared, not as a weapon, but as a beacon, a gentle, warm light that filled the dark warehouse. The terror in their eyes slowly gave way to awe. "You're free," he said, his voice soft. "My people will escort you to a safe place. You will be fed, cared for, and then you can go home." Some began to weep with relief. One small girl, no older than 6, cautiously approached him. She looked up at his glowing form, her eyes wide. "Are you an angel?" Naruto knelt, his smile gentle. "No, just a friend." Back in the square, Esdeath had Ogre encased in ice up to his neck, his face a mask of pure terror. Wave had successfully defeated and captured the other taigu user. The fighting was over. The port was theirs. Chelsea appeared at Naruto's side as his clones began organizing the liberated Slav and seizing the massive stockpile of gold, jewels, and supplies from Ogre's vaults. "Phase 4 is complete," she said, a satisfied smirk on her face. "We have enough funds to operate for years. And we have a new asset." She gestured to the hundreds of freed slaves, many of whom were staring at Naruto with expressions of pure reverence. "Word of this will spread. The golden ghost of the north who frees slaves. You're not just a reformer anymore. You're becoming a folk hero." This act did more than fill their coffers. It sent a shockwave through the empire. To the corrupt nobles, it was a terrifying declaration that their depravity would no longer be tolerated. To the common people, it was a spark of hope in a world of darkness. To the revolutionary army, it was a confounding move. Knight Raid had always seen Esdeath as a monster, and a redeemable symbol of the empire's evil. But now, she was part of a group that had just executed the single largest liberation of slaves in a decade. It threw their entire black and white worldview into question. And in the imperial army, it resonated with men like General Budo. The great general, the stoic and unshakable pillar of the military, had long despised Honest's corruption but saw the Revolutionary Army as an equal, if not greater, threat to the empire's stability. This new faction, Maelstrom, which declared loyalty to the emperor will actively cleansing the rot, it was a dangerous, unpredictable, but undeniably compelling development. Maelstrom had announced its arrival not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap. As dawn broke over the conquered port city, Naruto stood on the ice wall Esdeath had created, looking back towards the sky-throned citadel. He shared a look with Esdeath, who stood beside him, her usual bloodlust temp. With a strange new thrill of strategic victory. Chelsea joined them, her expression sharp and calculating, already planning their next move. They were no longer just three people. They were leaders. They were a symbol. They had followers, a fortress, and a cause. Their victory was short-lived. A scout clone, positioned miles away, suddenly dispersed, its memory flooding into Naruto's mind. An elite force was approaching. Not disorganized soldiers, but a unit that moved with the terrifying precision of true professionals. At their head was a man whose power signature was a roaring thunderstorm. General Budo, and with him were the Empire's most elite assassins, a unit even the Jaegers feared. Honest hadn't sent an army. He had sent executioners. Naruto's expression hardened. "We have company," he said, his voice low. "General Budo is coming. Looks like our first real test is about to begin." The elation of victory vanished, replaced by the grim reality of their new war. They had kicked the hornet's nest. Now, the swarm was coming. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Devil's Crossroads. The salt-laced wind whipped around the parapets of the liberated port, carrying the stench of battle in the distant murmuring gratitude of the freed slaves. The elation of their victory was a fragile thing, a flickering candle flame now threatened by the hurricane Naruto had just announced. "Budo," Esdeath said, the name tasting like stone in her mouth. Her predatory smile faded, replaced by a look of grim, professional respect. The great general himself. Honest must be truly terrified to unleash his staunchest hound. Chelsea's face was a mask of cold calculation. "This is bad. Budo isn't like the other generals. He's not corrupt, and he's not an idiot. He's an imperial traditionalist. He sees us as the destabilizing element. Not Honest. And his Taigu, Adramelech, gives him control over lightning. He's one of the few people in the Empire who could theoretically match you in raw power, Esdeath." "Theoretically," Esdeath scoffed, a spark of her usual arrogance returning. "We are not on a level playing field. I am a specialist in large-scale warfare. He is a duelist. There is a difference. He's not coming alone." Naruto interjected, his eyes closed as he processed the intel from his dispersed clones. "He has a team with him. They move like shadows. Fast, coordinated. An elite squad. The Aben Guard." Chelsea breathed, her expression tightening. "Honest's personal assassins. They operate outside the military structure. Utterly ruthless, completely loyal to the minister. Providing them with a military escort is unprecedented. It means he's been given a direct order from the emperor, or at least an order forged with the emperor's seal." Wave, who had joined them on the wall, looked pale. "General Budo and the Aben Guard. Against us. Can we even win that?" He had seen Budo in action once. The man was a force of nature, a living thunderstorm of martial discipline. "We don't have to win," Naruto said, opening his eyes. His gaze was sharp, focused. "We just have to not lose." He looked out at the frozen bay, at the ships trapped in the ice, at the city now under their control. "We can't fight them here. This is a civilian center. The collateral damage would be immense. We'd be no better than the people we're fighting." A tactical retreat. Esdeath raised an eyebrow. The concept was almost foreign to her. "We just won this territory." "We won the resources and the people," Naruto corrected. "The land is just land. We fall back to the sky-throne citadel. It's a fortress built for a siege. We can choose the battlefield. We make them come to us." His logic was undeniable. It was a strategic withdrawal, not a retreat born of fear. It was the smart move. "Chelsea," Naruto commanded, his voice taking on the tone of a field commander. "Organize the evacuation. Get the freed people moving towards the safe zones we established inland. Take what supplies we can carry quickly and torch the rest." We leave nothing for honest cronies to reclaim. Wave, he continued, you're with me. We're going to run interference. We're not going to fight Budo, we're going to delay him. Give Chelsea and Esdeath time to get everyone clear. What will I be doing? Esdeath asked, a dangerous glint in her eye. She was not used to being given defensive assignments. You, Naruto said, turning to her, are going to do something only you can. I need a wall. A big one. Something to funnel Budo's forces and slow their advance. A slow smile spread across Esdeath's face. Mass-scale environmental manipulation. A task worthy of her power. I can do that. The plan was set in motion with breathtaking speed. Maelstrom, under Chelsea's logistical genius, became a whirlwind of organized chaos. Gold and essential supplies were loaded onto wagons. The liberated slaves, galvanized by the promise of true freedom and protected by a contingent of Naruto's clones, began their exodus. Meanwhile, miles away, General Budo rode at the head of his column. He was a mountain of a man, his face set in grim, stoic lines, his immaculate white uniform a stark contrast to the black-clad Aben guard who flanked him. He despised the minister's pet assassins, but his orders were absolute. Capture or kill General Esdeath and her mysterious new ally, and bring the night raid assassin back in chains. They had been branded as traitors to the throne. It was a distasteful duty, but his loyalty was to the stability of the empire above all else, and this new faction was a match thrown into a powder keg. As they rounded a bend, they found their path blocked. A trench, 50 feet wide and just as deep, had been gouged into the landscape, stretching for half a mile in either direction. It was a clean cut, as if a giant had carved it with a knife. Budo halted his horse, his eyes narrowing. This was an engineered obstacle. Fresh. An earth-moving taigu, one of the Aben guard captains murmured. No, Budo said, his voice a low rumble. This feels different. From the other side of the trench, two figures appeared. Naruto, his golden hair unmistakable, and Wave, his grand chariot armor gleaming. General Budo, Naruto called across the gap, his voice calm and respectful. I'd ask you to turn back, but I know you won't. Your sense of duty is too strong. Budo's eyes widened slightly. The boy spoke to him not as an enemy, but as someone who understood him. You are Naruto Uzumaki, Budo stated. You have been declared a traitor. Surrender now, and you may be granted a swift execution. I can't do that, Naruto replied. We're not traitors. We're trying to save the empire from the man giving you your orders. My orders come from the emperor, Budo countered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Do they? Naruto asked pointedly, or do they come from a fat man whispering poison in the emperor's ear? The question hit its mark. Budo's jaw tightened. He knew the truth of the minister's influence better than anyone. Before he could reply, Naruto made a hand sign. I don't want to fight you, General. But I will slow you down. The ground on Budo's side of the trench erupted. Dozens of shadow clones burst from the earth, not attacking, but creating chaos. They threw smoke bombs, collapsed trees to block the path, and engaged the Aben guard in a dizzying, non-lethal flurry of taijutsu. Their goal simply to disorient and delay. Budo ignored the clones. His focus was on the real Naruto across the chasm. He raised a hand, and the sky, which had been clear moments before, began to darken. Ozone filled the air. You cannot stop the storm. A bolt of brilliant purple lightning shot from his hand, crossing the chasm in an instant. It wasn't aimed at Naruto, but at the ground in front of him. A warning shot. Wave instinctively moved to shield Naruto, but Naruto held up a hand. A small, transparent sphere of chakra, no bigger than his fist, appeared in his palm. He intercepted the lightning bolt with it. The raw, destructive energy of the storm was absorbed into the sphere, swirling violently before dissipating with a soft hiss. Budo's eyes went wide. No taigu he knew of could simply absorb and nullify an electrical attack like that. Like I said, Naruto called out, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. I don't want to fight you. This was a distraction. Naruto and Wave were simply the bait. The real move was happening miles behind them. As Budo's forces were delayed, Esdeath stood atop a mountain ridge overlooking the main pass that led towards the Sky Throne Citadel. She took a deep breath, the frigid air filling her lungs. This was a new application of her power, one suggested by Naruto. Not for killing, for building. She plunged her hands into the snow-covered rock, and her power, the very essence of absolute zero, flowed out of her. It was not the explosive, violent creation of ice spikes and weapons. This was a slow, deep freeze. The moisture in the air, in the ground, in the very rock itself, began to crystallize. The ground groaned and bucked. Slowly, majestically, a wall of pure, crystalline ice, infused with the dark stone of the mountain itself, began to rise. It stretched from one side of the vast canyon to the other, a sheer, unscalable barrier 1,000 feet high and 200 feet thick. It was not a temporary structure. She was freezing the mountain range itself, creating a new, permanent geographic feature. A monument to her power, repurposed as a shield. The effort was immense, draining her reserves at a prodigious rate. But the thrill of creation on such a scale was intoxicating. It was a new kind of strength. By the time Budo and his forces disengaged from Naruto's clones and found a way across the trench, they were met with the sight of this impossible structure. The Great Wall of Esdeath, as her soldiers would later call it. It blocked the main route to her fortress, forcing them on a week-long detour through treacherous, hostile territory. Naruto and Wave had vanished. Maelstrom had won the first move. They had bought themselves time. Precious, vital time. The strategic victory was a cold comfort. The mood in Sky Throne Citadel was tense. They had repelled Budo for now, but they knew he would be back. They had declared war on the most powerful man in the Empire, and the Empire was now striking back. Their numbers were growing. The liberated slaves, given the choice to leave, had largely chosen to stay. The men and women who had been brutalized by Honest's regime now looked to Naruto as a savior. Many were simple craftsmen, farmers, or merchants, but dozens were former soldiers who had been unjustly sold into slavery. They began to form the core of a volunteer army, trained by Wave and a handful of Esdeath's loyal veterans. Maelstrom was evolving from an elite squad into a true military force. But their enemies were not idle. A week later, Chelsea's new intelligence network, a web of spies and informants cobbled together from her old night raid contacts and disillusioned officials, brought terrible news. "It's a three-way collision course," she said, her voice grim. She stood before the command table, where Naruto and Esdeath were assembled. "The Revolutionary Army has laid siege to the city of Kyorik. It's a vital strategic fortress that controls the main trade route to the west. It's currently commanded by General Nua, one of Budo's chief rivals in the military." "Nua is an arrogant fool, but his defenses are strong," Esdeath commented. "The revolutionaries will bleed themselves dry trying to take that city." "Normally, yes," Chelsea agreed. "But Honest is making a move. My sources in the palace say he's using this as an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. He sees Nua's faction as a threat to his own power base. He's dispatched a team to Kyorik, disguised as reinforcements." "Let me guess," Naruto said, his eyes narrowing. "They're not there to reinforce. They're there to sabotage." "Worse," Chelsea said, her face pale. "They're carrying a package, something from Honest's private collection of artifacts. My source didn't know what it was. Only that it came from a deep vault, and the people handling it were terrified of it. It's described as a shard of a black sun." Naruto and Esdeath exchanged a dark look. They knew what that meant. "It's one of the Calamity fragments, Kit." Kurama's voice was a low growl in his mind. "Like the one in the temple, but bigger. Much bigger. That fat bastard is going to unleash it on the battlefield. He's insane." Naruto breathed. "He's going to set that thing off in the middle of a battle between two massive armies. The bloodshed, the negative emotion, it will be like pouring gasoline on a fire. He'll create a monster that could consume the entire province. He doesn't care," Esdeath said, her voice filled with a cold fury. "He'll get rid of a rival general, cripple the Revolutionary Army, and then send me or Budo in to clean up the resulting mess, claiming it was a new weapon from the rebels. He'll come out of it looking like the savior of the Empire." The sheer, diabolical cynicism of the plan was staggering. He was willing to sacrifice tens of thousands of his own soldiers and create a potential apocalyptic threat, all for a political advantage. "We have to stop it," Naruto said, his fists clenching. "We have to intervene." "Intervene?" Esdeath questioned, for once the cautious one. "Naruto, that is a battlefield with over 100,000 soldiers. The revolutionaries will see us as Imperials. The Imperials will see us as traitors. We'll be caught in a meat grinder. She's right, Chelsea added. There's no strategic advantage for us here. The best move is to let them slaughter each other and stay out of it. No, Naruto's voice was absolute. We are not like them. We don't sacrifice innocent lives for strategic advantage. Those are our people out there. Imperial soldiers who think they're fighting for their country. Revolutionary soldiers who think they're fighting for a better world. They're all just pawns in a game being played by men like Honest and, to some extent, their own leaders. Maelstrom was founded on the idea that the strong protect the weak. If we hide in our fortress while 100,000 people are about to be sacrificed, then we are hypocrites. And our cause is meaningless. His words hung in the air, a powerful moral declaration. This was a test of their new identity. Were they just another faction vying for power? Or were they truly something different? Esdeath looked at him, at the fire in his eyes. This was the man who had defeated her, the man who had spoken of a forest where the strong sheltered the weak. This was his philosophy in action. It was reckless. It was insane. And it was the reason she was following him. So we fly into the heart of a hurricane, she said, a slow, wild smile returning to her face. To fight two armies and a baby god. This will be a glorious battle. Chelsea just sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. I'm going to need a bigger map. Their intervention was a blitzkrieg of impossible power. They arrived at Kyorik on a fleet of commandeered air skiffs, flying directly into the no man's land between the besieged city and the Revolutionary Army's war camp. The battle below was a scene from hell. Catapults launched flaming projectiles. Rivers of soldiers clashed in a brutal, churning mass of steel and blood. The air was thick with the screams of the dying and the thunder of war. Maelstrom's arrival brought the entire battle to a stunned halt. This is Naruto Uzumaki of Maelstrom. Naruto's voice, amplified by chakra, boomed across the battlefield, silencing the chaos. This battle is over. Lay down your arms. Your leaders have betrayed you. A weapon of mass destruction is about to be unleashed on this field. No one listened. A volley of arrows flew from both sides, aimed at their skiffs. So much for diplomacy, Chelsea muttered from the command skiff. Plan B, then, Naruto said grimly. He made a single hand sign. Below, the battlefield erupted. Not with explosions, but with smoke. 10,000 shadow clones appeared simultaneously, a phantom army materializing from thin air. They didn't attack. They moved with a singular purpose, to separate the combatants. They formed living walls between the clashing armies, pushing them back. They disarmed soldiers, destroyed catapults, and began pulling the wounded from the field, carrying them to Hast. Illy established triage centers behind the lines. From the command skiff, Esdeath stepped onto a floating platform of ice. Now, Naruto, she asked, her voice eager. Now, he confirmed. She raised her hands, and with a roar of exhilaration, unleashed her power defensively. Not spikes or blades, but walls. Colossal barriers of ice, hundreds of feet high, erupted from the earth, physically separating the main armies, corralling them into manageable quadrants. She found a strange, deep satisfaction in it. The sheer scale of it, the control, the knowledge that she was using her world-breaking power to save lives, not take them. It was a new, intoxicating application of her strength. While the clones and Esdeath managed the battlefield, Naruto, Chelsea, and Wave made for the city of Kyorik itself. They landed on the main battlements, where General Nua, a pompous man in an absurdly ornate suit of armor, was screaming at them. Traitors! How dare you interfere? Shut up, you idiot, Chelsea snapped, her patience gone. The reinforcements Honest sent you. They're here to kill you. As if on cue, a massive explosion rocked the city's central keep. A wave of dark, corrupted energy pulsed outwards, and a pillar of sickly black light shot into the sky. The air grew cold, and a wave of pure, unadulterated dread washed over the entire continent, a psychic scream that every living thing felt in its soul. The first calamity's consciousness, drawn by the feast of death and despair on the battlefield, had briefly awakened. From the shattered keep, a monstrosity began to crawl. It was a writhing mass of black tentacles, melted stone, and screaming human faces, the fused bodies of honest saboteurs and the artifact they had carried. It was a nascent avatar of the calamity, a cancer of reality growing in the heart of the city. General Nua stared in horror. What in the gods' names is that thing? That, Naruto said grimly, as a vibrant, golden aura exploded around him, is the real enemy. He entered his full six paths sage mode, levitating into the air, 10 black truth-seeking orbs materializing behind him. He was a figure of myth, a god of light against a creature of darkness. The calamity fragment lashed out with a dozen tentacles, each moving with impossible speed. Naruto became a blur of gold, his black orbs shifting into shields and swords, intercepting every blow. He flew towards the monster, a golden comet against the encroaching night. At that moment, a new force arrived on the battlefield. A column of Imperial heavy cavalry, led by a figure crackling with purple lightning. General Budo. He had taken the long route and arrived to find a scene of utter madness. The battle was halted, a giant ice wall bisected the landscape, and in the sky above the city, a golden god was fighting a creature from the deepest pits of hell. His eyes fell on the maelstrom flag flying from Naruto's command skiff. He saw the clones tending to the wounded from both sides. He saw Esdeath using her power to create barriers, not weapons. And he saw the monster that had erupted from the city his orders were to reinforce. Everything Naruto had told him was true. Honest was not just corrupt. He was a monster, willing to sacrifice them all. The calamity fragment, sensing Naruto's immense power, let out a psychic shriek that shattered windows for miles. The ground around the city began to mutate. Trees twisted into grasping claws. The earth turned to a black, bubbling ooze. Mutated danger beasts, drawn by the power, began to crawl from the corrupted soil, attacking Imperial and revolutionary soldiers alike. The civil war was over. The war for survival had begun. All forces. Budo's amplified voice roared across the field, overriding all else. Cease hostilities with the revolutionary army. Our enemy is that thing. And its corrupted spawn. Fight with Maelstrom. For the Empire. For humanity. Najanda, the leader of Night Raid, watching from the revolutionary command tent through a pair of binoculars, stared in disbelief. Her entire world had just been turned upside down. Naruto, meanwhile, knew he couldn't just destroy the Calamity Avatar. That would only release its corrupting energy. It had to be contained. He flew high above it, his hands coming together. Sage Art. 6 Paths Chibaku Tensai. He created a black sphere, a gravity core, and hurled it into the center of the monster. The creature was instantly drawn towards it. The earth around it, the shattered keep, the corrupted ground, all of it was ripped from the planet and pulled into a growing sphere of rock and debris. The monster shrieked, struggling against the irresistible gravitational pull, but it was useless. It was sealed away, along with the corrupted ground it had created, into a new miniature moon that hung in the sky, a permanent tomb for the monster. As the dust settled, the battlefield was silent. The surviving soldiers from both armies stared up at the new moon, then at the golden figure descending from the sky. The fight was over. Naruto had not just stopped a battle, he had ended the war. In the eerie quiet of the aftermath, a lone figure approached Naruto's position. General Budo. He walked not with his sword drawn, but with his helmet under his arm. His face was a mask of grim understanding and newfound respect. He stopped before Naruto, the greatest general of the Empire, before the man who had just saved them all. The civil war was no longer the real war. He knew, with absolute certainty, who he had to follow now. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. An alliance of monsters and men. The miniature moon, a sphere of dark rock and sealed horror, hung in the afternoon sky like a jagged scar. Below it, the battlefield of Kyorik was a landscape of surreal stillness. The armies of the Empire and the Revolution, which had been locked in a death struggle hours before, now stood in stunned, silent clusters, their weapons lowered. Medics from both sides, guided by Naruto's clones, moved amongst the wounded, the color of a man's uniform suddenly irrelevant in the face of the shared, cosmic terror they had just witnessed. Esdeath's colossal ice walls, their defensive purpose served, began to sublimate under her control, melting not into a flood, but into a thick, rolling fog that shrouded the field in an ethereal mist. It was a tactical move suggested by Chelsea, meant to de-escalate, to prevent panicked soldiers from firing on their former enemies. Naruto landed softly, the golden aura of his six paths sage mode receding, leaving him standing in the cratered courtyard of Kyorik. A man once more. The immense power faded, but the authority it had projected lingered, a palpable weight in the air. Wave stood by his side, his grand chariot armor spattered with the black ichor of the mutated beasts he had helped cut down. General Budo approached, his heavy armored boots crunching on rubble. He stopped 10 feet away, his expression a complex mixture of awe, shame, and grim resolve. He, the pillar of imperial order, had been chasing a traitor, while the true enemy, a cancer nurtured by his own government, had almost consumed them all. Uzumaki Naruto. Budo's voice was a low rumble, devoid of its earlier aggression. He performed a short, formal bow, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another. I owe you my life. And the lives of my men. I was blind. You were loyal, General. Naruto replied, his voice calm. That's not a sin. But your loyalty was misplaced. It was given to a man, not to the people he was supposed to protect. I see that now, Budo said, his gaze drifting up to the floating sphere of rock. That thing, Honest unleashed it. Willingly. He is not just a corrupt politician. He is an existential threat to this nation. To the world. Before Naruto could respond, another group approached from the direction of the Revolutionary Army's camp. They moved with the quiet confidence of elite operatives. At their lead was a woman with silver hair and a black eye patch, her expression stern and calculating. Najanda, the leader of Night Raid. Flanking her were the rest of her team. The stoic, red-eyed Akame, the brash, lion-maned Leone, the bookish Lubbock. The pink-haired sniper Mine, the armored brute Bullet, and a green-haired young man with a look of fierce determination, Tatsumi. They stopped, forming a tense semicircle opposite Budo. The air crackled with years of ingrained hatred. Akame's hand was a white-knuckled grip on the hilt of her cursed blade. Murasama, her gaze locked on Esdeath, who had just joined Naruto's side. A possessive arm snaking around his. The animosity between the two women was a physical force, a pocket of pure killing intent in the otherwise subdued atmosphere. Najanda, Esdeath purred, her eyes glinting with amusement. Still playing at rebellion. I see you've brought your whole litter of puppies with you. Esdeath. Najanda's voice was cold steel. I should have known you'd be at the center of this nightmare. Her gaze flickered to Naruto. And you're with her. You wear the Jaeger's white. Why should we believe you're any different? Because if we were the same, you'd all be dead, Naruto stated flatly. His words cutting through the posturing. We just saved your army. And the Imperial won. You're welcome. Tatsumi stepped forward, his eyes wide as he looked at Naruto. It was you. I saw you. In the sky. What are you? He's our leader, Wave answered, his voice ringing with a conviction that surprised even himself. And he's the only one who can get us through what's coming. What's coming is the end of the world if we don't stop it, Chelsea said, striding forward from the command skiff, a data slate in her hand. Her gaze met Najanda's, a flicker of old familiarity between the former comrades. Hello, boss. Things have gotten complicated. Naruto knew this was the critical moment. He had their attention. Now he had to forge the impossible. I'm calling a truce summit, he announced. His voice carrying over the tense standoff. Right here, right now. You, Najanda, you, Budo, the leaders, we talk. The rest of you, he glanced at the bristling members of Night Raid and Budo's wary officers, will wait. And you will not try to kill each other. If you do, I will personally end it. And you won't like how. The threat was unspoken but absolute. He had just imprisoned a demigod in a moon. Subduing a few hot-headed assassins was well within his capabilities. Reluctantly, Najanda and Budo agreed. They moved to the center of the courtyard, forming a triangle with Naruto. Esdeath, Chelsea, and Akame stood back, a trio of silent, deadly chaperones, their respective gazes locked on one another. The first calamity is real, Naruto began, wasting no time on pleasantries. The Taigu are its fragments. Its consciousness is sleeping, but the constant bloodshed of your war is waking it up. It feeds on negative emotions, hatred, fear, despair. Your war is literally its food source. Honest knew this, or at least suspected it. He tried to use a fragment as a weapon today, and it almost spiraled out of his control. This is what Kurama has shown me. As he spoke, He channeled a small wisp of Kurama's chakra, not the terrifying red cloak, but a gentle, ethereal energy. He projected images into their minds. It was a disorienting, invasive experience, but it was brutally effective. He showed them Kurama's memories, not of his own world, but the pure, conceptual understanding the ancient beast had of power, of cycles of hatred, of Kagaya and the Ten Tails. He showed them the calamity as a being of absolute hunger, a force of nature like a black hole, that would not stop until it had consumed every speck of life on the planet. Budo, a man of faith and tradition, saw a vision of hell made manifest. The end of the empire, the end of everything he had sworn to protect. The images confirmed the terrifying truth he had witnessed with his own eyes. Najanda, the hardened pragmatist, saw the ultimate futility of her revolution. What was the point of liberating a people if the world itself was doomed? Her entire life's work, her sacrifices, the lives of her fallen comrades, all of it rendered meaningless in the face of this cosmic threat. Honest has made the Imperial Palace his fortress, Chelsea added, stepping forward and holding out the data slate. My intelligence suggests he has turned the palace dungeons into a laboratory. He's gathering more of these calamity fragments. He's not just using them anymore. I think he's trying to merge with them. To control the power directly. He is making himself the anchor, Naruto said, the grim realization dawning on him. He's trying to become the calamity's vessel, thinking he can control it. He's going to accelerate its return, centered on the capital. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of their new reality. The civil war was a foolish, indulgent squabble. The real enemy was a madman sitting on a throne of lies, about to pull the pin on an apocalyptic grenade. I will not allow it, Budo declared, his voice a vow of iron. Honest has desecrated the sanctity of the throne and endangered the entire empire. He must be removed. My forces are yours to command, Uzumaki Naruto. Not as a matter of imperial doctrine, but because you are the only one who has demons. Traded the power and the will to face this threat. My loyalty is no longer to the corrupt government. It is to humanity. He knelt, a shocking gesture of fealty from the great general. Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder. Get up, General. I don't need kneeling soldiers. I need standing allies. Budo rose, his expression one of unwavering resolve. One pillar of the new alliance was in place. The other was far more difficult. All eyes turned to Najanda. This is insane. Mine, the sniper, burst out from the night raid group. Ally with the Empire. With them. She jabbed a finger towards Budo and Esdeath. They're the monsters we've been fighting our whole lives. Esdeath has killed thousands. Budo's army has oppressed countless villages. We can't just forget that. She's right, Leonie added, her usual boisterous demeanor gone. Replaced by a low growl. We were created to destroy the Empire, not hold hands with it. The sentiment was strong. The hatred was too deep. The wounds were too raw. Akame, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried an immense weight. Her red eyes were fixed on Esdeath, a burning focus of personal animosity. I have to kill you, Esdeath. It is my mission, my purpose. Esdeath met her gaze, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Many have tried, little sword. They all failed. The tension ratcheted up again, threatening to shatter the fragile truce. Naruto stepped between them, his body physically blocking their lines of sight. He didn't look at Esdeath. He looked directly at Akame, his gaze piercing, seeing Pa. Saint the assassin to the broken girl beneath. Then kill her, he said. The entire night raid team stared at him in shock. Even Esdeath's smile faltered for a second. Hate her, Naruto continued, his voice resonating with an unshakable, pragmatic authority. Hate Budo. Hate me for working with them. I don't care. Your feelings don't matter right now. Your vengeance doesn't matter. Your missions don't matter. Only one thing matters. Survival. Help me save the world. Help me stop Honest from turning this entire continent into a feeding ground for a cosmic horror. He let that sink in, his words. A bucket of ice water on their fiery emotions. When it's over, he said, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper, if we're all still standing, then you can have your vengeance. I won't stop you. You can try to kill Esdeath. You can try to kill Budo. You can try to kill me. I give you my word. He was offering them permission. He was validating their hatred, but postponing its release. It was a brilliant, brutally honest maneuver. He wasn't asking them to forgive their enemies. He was asking them to work with them, for the most practical reason of all, to ensure there was still a world left to have their final battles in. Tatsumi looked at the faces of his comrades. He saw the conflict, the ingrained hatred warring with the terrifying truth they had just learned. He thought of his friends from his village, dead because of this corrupt world. He thought of Bullet, of Shield, fallen comrades. What would they want? Revenge, or a future? He's right, Tatsumi said, finding his voice. He looked at Najanda. Boss, he's right. What's the point of winning the war if everyone is dead? We have to stop Honest first. Whatever comes after, comes after. Tatsumi's earnest plea, combined with Naruto's raw pragmatism, was the tipping point. Najanda looked at her team, then at Budo's stoic face, then at Naruto, the impossible nexus of this alliance. Fine, she said, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. Night Raid will join your alliance. We will fight under your command, Uzumaki Naruto. Until Honest and the Calamity threat are dealt with. She turned to her team. We have a new mission. Save the world. The Grand Alliance was born. Not in a grand hall with signed treaties, but on a blood-soaked battlefield, forged from desperation, pragmatism, and the sheer force of will of one man. The logistics of merging three hostile factions into a cohesive fighting force were a nightmare Chelsea dove into with a terrifying glee. She immediately established herself as the head of joint intelligence. Her sharp mind and ruthless efficiency the perfect glue to hold the disparate parts together. She took Lubbock, Night Raid's wire specialist, under her wing, his network of informants combined with her own creating an intelligence-gathering machine the likes of which the Empire had never seen. Budo, as the highest-ranking military official, took command of the main army. His authority bringing the remnants of the imperial forces at Kyorik into line. He and Najanda, the two opposing generals, were forced into a room by Chelsea to coordinate troop movements, their initial interactions clipped and hostile, but slowly evolving into a grudging, professional respect. Night Raid was officially designated as the Alliance's Special Operations Unit. Their mission: infiltration, sabotage, and eliminating key targets in the capital ahead of the main assault. Akame and her team were finally unleashed for what they did best, but their targets were no longer just corrupt nobles. They were the cultists and scientists helping Honest channel the Calamity's power. Esdeath, to the surprise of many, was given command of the vanguard. Naruto's reasoning was simple. He needed a can opener. When the assault on the capital began, he needed a force that could shatter the main defenses with overwhelming power, and no one in the world was better suited for that than her. She relished the role. A wild wolf finally pointed at a worthy throat, her thirst for battle aligned, for the first time, with a cause greater than her own amusement. And at the head of it all was Naruto, the supreme commander. He was the strategist, the moral compass, and the ultimate weapon. He spent his time not in a command tent, but moving between the camps. He sparred with Akame and Tatsumi, teaching them concepts of chakra control and battle reading that revolutionized their fighting styles. He debated philosophy with Budo, challenging the old general's rigid worldview. He held councils of war where former enemies were forced to collaborate, his presence the force that kept their old hatreds from boiling over. He was the heart of the alliance, and his conviction pumped life into its veins. Their objective was clear: a full-scale assault on the imperial capital to dethrone Prime Minister Honest and stop the resurrection of the First Calamity. As their new, unified army began its march, news of the miracle at Kyorik had already spread. The story of how two warring armies had been forced into a truce by a golden god who created a new moon was a legend in the making. Disillusioned imperial garrisons and rebel cells, hearing of the Grand Alliance, began to abandon their posts and flock to their banner. Their army swelled with every league they marched. Meanwhile, in the capital, Prime Minister Honest felt the shift in power. His political allies were abandoning him. His military was fracturing. He was isolated, cornered, and paranoid. He retreated to the deepest levels of the palace, to his hidden laboratory. Surrounded by the black, pulsating shards of the Calamity. Fools, he muttered to himself, his body trembling, his eyes glowing with a faint, dark light. They think they can stop me. They can't stop a god. He looked at the largest fragment, a pulsating, heart-like mass of black crystal. They want to take my power. My empire. I will give it all to you. I will be your vessel. And in return, we will unmake this world and build it anew. In my image. He plunged his hands into the sickening, living mass of the calamity fragment. A wave of unimaginable pain and ecstatic power surged through him. His body convulsed, his flesh melting and reforming, his screams of agony turning into peals of insane laughter. The sky above the imperial capital began to darken, a swirling vortex of black and purple energy gathering directly over the palace. The final gambit had been made. The countdown to apocalypse had begun. On the edge of the Alliance's massive war camp, Naruto stood with Esdeath and Chelsea, watching the horizon, where the darkened sky of the capital was a visible stain against the heavens. He's accelerating it, Naruto said, his voice grim. He's offering himself up. Let him, Esdeath said, her hand resting on the hilt of her rapier. It will just make the battle more glorious. All units are in position, Chelsea reported, her face illuminated by the glow of her slate. Night Raid has already begun neutralizing the outer defenses. Budo's army is ready to march. The vanguard is yours, Esdeath. The three of them stood together, the sage, the general, the assassin. The unlikely core of a desperate hope. They had forged an army of monsters and men, united bitter enemies, and declared war on a god in the making. The final battle was not for a throne or for a nation. It was for the soul of their world. Let's go, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the storm gathering over the capital. Let's finish this. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sage, the General, the Assassin. The air crackled with a foul, ancient energy. From their vantage point on a hill overlooking the imperial capital, the Grand Alliance watched as the sky itself seemed to bleed. A swirling vortex of bruised purple and necrotic black churned directly above the palace, a maelstrom of cosmic sickness that pulsed in time with a slow, silent heartbeat felt in the bones of every soldier present. The city, once a symbol of gilded authority, now looked like a festering wound on the face of the planet. Naruto stood at the forefront, the wind whipping at his cloak. Beside him, Esdeath's expression was one of ecstatic, predatory focus. This was it, the ultimate battle, a worthy challenge against a foe that threatened to unmake reality itself. On his other side, Chelsea's face was taut, her eyes scanning the data slate that was her lifeline to the sprawling, multifaceted assault she had orchestrated. Night Raid confirms, Chelsea's voice was sharp, cutting through the low rumble of the assembled army. They've disabled the primary defensive Taigu on the outer walls and taken out the command posts for the loyalist garrisons. The door is open. Budo's legions are in position to begin the main push. She continued, her fingers flying across the screen. They'll secure the city sector by sector, providing a safe corridor for the civilians we can't evacuate. And the vanguard? Esdeath asked, her voice a low purr of anticipation. Chelsea looked up, a grim smile touching her lips. The stage is yours, General. Naruto glanced at Esdeath. This isn't about slaughter. It's about speed. We need a path, straight to the palace. Clear it. A path you shall have, she promised. With a final nod, Esdeath strode forward, her presence a wave of absolute cold that washed over her assembled troops, a mix of her own loyal veterans and the most elite of Budo's shock troops. She leapt onto a massive shard of ice she had created, a floating dais that lifted her high above the vanguard. Soldiers. Her voice, amplified by her own power, was as clear and sharp as a cracking glacier. It cut through the dread emanating from the city. Look upon that sky. That is not the power of a man. That is the wail of a dying world. Our enemy is not a king or a rebel. Our enemy is oblivion itself. We fight today not for glory, not for coin, not for the empire, but for the right to see the sun rise tomorrow. Show them the fury of the vanguard. Charge. With a deafening roar that shook the very hills, the vanguard surged forward. At its head was Esdeath. She didn't run. She flew, carried on her shard of ice, a Valkyrie of the apocalypse. As she approached the city's massive outer wall, she raised her hand. Mahapadma. The world didn't freeze. Time did. For everyone watching, it was as if reality itself stuttered. A dome of shimmering, crystalline energy expanded from Esdeath, washing over the section of the wall before them and the legion of mutated imperial guards manning it. For the soldiers trapped within the dome, their world simply stopped. They were frozen mid-motion, their grotesque, corrupted faces locked in snarls of aggression. Esdeath's ultimate Taigu, her time-freezing trump card, was not a weapon she could use lightly. It drained her catastrophically. But here, used not to kill, but to create an opening, it was the perfect key. The wall is neutralized for 1 minute. She bellowed. Go. The vanguard charged through the now defenseless gate, pouring into the city streets. As they passed, time resumed with a jarring lurch. The mutated guards, their temporal prison shattered, had only a moment of confusion before they were overwhelmed by the tide of elite soldiers. The battle for the capital had begun. It was apocalyptic. The city itself had become an extension of Honest's corrupted will. Cobblestones melted into grasping, tar-like hands. Buildings twisted, their windows becoming leering eyes that wept black ooze. And the defenders were a nightmare legion. Not just the remaining Imperial soldiers, their minds twisted into fanatical loyalty by the calamity's psychic influence, but armies of newly spawned danger beasts, Crete. Ewers of chitin and shadow that crawled from the very sewers. Budo's army crashed into this meat grinder, a disciplined force of steel against a tide of madness. The general himself was a whirlwind of righteous fury, his Adramelech Taigu turning him into a living thunderstorm. He moved through the corrupted streets, bolts of divine lightning vaporizing the abominations that dared stand against him, his presence a bulwark for his men. From the rooftops and alleyways, Night Raid moved like ghosts. They were the scalpel to Budo's hammer. Leonie, her beast form making her an unstoppable brawler, cleared paths for fleeing civilians. Lubbock's wires became an intricate web, trapping monsters and creating escape routes. Mine's sniper rifle, Pumpkin, fired blasts of concussive energy that could level a building. Its power amplified by the sheer desperation of their situation. Tatsumi and Wave, now fighting side by side, were a perfect duo. Tatsumi's Incursio armor, an evolving draconic shell, and Wave's grand chariot, a bastion of defense, made them a spearhead that could not be broken. They fought with a synergy born of shared ideals, covering each other's backs, their past as enemies a forgotten dream. While the larger battle raged, a smaller, more critical strike team moved through the chaos, following the path Esdeath had carved. Naruto, Esdeath, and Akame. Their destination was the palace. Their target was Honest. Esdeath was a force of nature unleashed. She no longer bothered with the finesse of rapiers or ice daggers. She was a goddess of winter, her power on a cataclysmic scale. A wave of her hand sent a tidal wave of jagged ice down a boulevard, clearing a path a mile long. She pointed a finger, and a localized blizzard erupted, flash freezing a swarm of winged abominations. She was fighting to protect her new world, to protect the man who had shown her a strength beyond mere domination, and her power, unshackled and given purpose, was terrifying to behold. Akame moved in her wake, a silent shadow of death. Her blade, Murasama, flashed with impossible speed. She didn't waste a single motion. Every creature that slipped past Esdeath's overwhelming assault met its end on the tip of her cursed katana. One cut, one scratch, and the poison of the blade did the rest. She and Esdeath, the two women who hated each other most in the world, fought with a terrifying, unspoken synergy. The unstoppable force and the immovable object, aimed in the same direction. Naruto was their anchor. He was the eye of their hurricane. While they destroyed, he saved. A Rasengan obliterated a cluster of monsters threatening a group of Budo's soldiers. A wall of shadow clones appeared to intercept a volley of corrupted energy, sacrificing themselves to shield a hospital. His Senso Rai abilities were a command and control network, feeding information to Chelsea, warning his allies of flanking attacks, identifying the weak points in the enemy's tide. They reached the palace plaza to find their path blocked. Not by a mindless beast, but by a man. General Budo, his armor cracked and smoking, stood alone, facing the massive, pulsating gates of the palace. The gates were reinforced with a lattice of black, organic material, a living extension of the calamity's power. Naruto, Budo yelled as they approached. The gate is shielded by the calamity's energy. My lightning can't breach it. It regenerates too quickly. He was right. Even as he spoke, the damage from his last attack was healing, the black tendrils writhing and re-knitting. I can't freeze it, Esdeath said, her breath pluming. The energy is too chaotic. It shrugs off the cold. Then we go through it, Naruto said. Budo looked at him, then at the gate. A grim understanding dawned on his face. He knew what he had to do. Get back, Budo commanded, his voice taking on a final, booming authority. He turned to face the gate, his back to them. I am the great general of the empire. My duty has always been to protect its people and its throne. I failed in the first. I will not fail in the second. He raised his hands to the sky, and the storm vortex above the palace seemed to answer. Lightning, purple and brilliant, converged on him. Not as an attack, but as a gathering of power. His body began to glow, his armor cracking and falling away under the strain. My Taigu, Adramelech, does not just command the storm, he roared. His voice now the sound of thunder itself. It is the storm. This is my final duty. My ultimate justice. Naruto recognized the technique. It was the same principle as the 8 gates. A release of all safeties. A suicidal outpouring of all of one's life force for one ultimate attack. General. No, Naruto yelled, starting forward. This is my choice. Budo shouted back, not turning. To clear the way for the future. For the new empire you will build. Now go, and kill that bastard for me. With a final, earth-shattering roar, Budo became a living bolt of lightning. He shot forward, a spear of pure, divine energy, and struck the palace gates. The explosion was not a sound. It was a physical event that erased sound. A silent, expanding dome of white light that vaporized the gates, the plaza, and a significant portion of the palace's front facade. It was the ultimate sacrifice, a final act of loyalty from a good man who had served a bad master. He had died not as a general of a corrupt empire, but as a hero of the new world. Naruto, Esdeath, and Akame were shielded from the blast by a hastily erected truth-seeking orb, but the force of it still threw them back. As the light faded, a gaping, smoking hole existed where the front of the palace had been. Their path was clear. They didn't hesitate. They charged into the breach, into the lion's den. The interior of the palace was a biological nightmare. The opulent halls were now tunnels of pulsating flesh and weeping sores. The air was thick and hard to breathe. At the heart of it all, in the cavernous, transformed throne room, their target was waiting. Prime Minister Honest was no longer a man. He was a monstrous fusion of his own corpulent flesh and the black, chaotic energy of the first calamity. He was a bloated, multi-limbed horror seated on a throne of living bone, his face, still recognizable, stretched into a rictus of divine madness. He was an avatar, an anchor for a power he couldn't possibly comprehend. So, the insects have breached my holy sanctum, the thing that was honest boomed, its voice a chorus of 1,000 screaming souls. You are too late. The ceremony is almost complete. I am ascending. I am this world's new god. You're a parasite, Naruto said, his 6 paths sage mode flaring to its brightest, in a stolen body. The final fight began. Esdeath and Akame moved as one, a blur of ice and black steel. Esdeath created massive ice constructs, golems, lances, walls, to batter the avatar's physical form, to pin its thrashing tendrils. Her power, the antithesis of the calamity's chaotic life, was one of the few things that could harm it directly. Akame was a phantom, weaving through the chaos, her blade seeking a single, decisive opening. She was faster than she had ever been. Her movements honed by Naruto's teachings, her focus absolute. She dodged beams of pure chaotic energy, slid under sweeping limbs of flesh, her only goal to land one single, perfect cut. While they engaged the physical form, Naruto closed his eyes. He extended his own consciousness, his spirit buoyed by the vast, calm ocean of nature energy, and dove headfirst into the calamity's own mind. He found himself in a void, a place of absolute darkness, filled with a single, overwhelming sensation, hunger. It was a cold, lonely, mindless hunger. There was no grand evil plan, no desire for domination. It was like the 10 tails, but even more primal, a force of nature that existed only to consume, a cosmic mistake born of a lonely, empty universe. He couldn't use his talk no jutsu here. There was nothing to talk to. It was like trying to reason with a star-going supernova. But he could understand it. The loneliness, the emptiness. It was an echo of his own childhood, magnified to a cosmic, world-breaking scale. And he knew what he had to do. He couldn't destroy it. That would just scatter its essence again, planting the seeds for a new calamity thousands of years down the line. He had to do what his predecessor, Hagoromo, had done. Containment. Creation. Back in the physical world, Akame saw her chance. Esdeath had managed to momentarily freeze the Avatar's right side, leaving its bloated, vaguely human torso exposed. With a final, desperate burst of speed, Akame shot forward, her blade flashing. She scored a deep, clean cut across the monster's chest. "The curse will consume you," she roared. But the Avatar only laughed. "A curse. I am a curse." The black markings of Murasama's poison spread, but they were instantly consumed by the calamity's power, neutralized. The monster backhanded Akame, sending her flying across the room, where she crashed into a pillar, wounded and out of the fight. Esdeath screamed in rage and unleashed her full power, encasing the entire upper half of the Avatar in a mountain of jagged ice. The ice began to crack almost immediately under the strain. "It's over," Honest's voice boomed. "I am eternal." "No," a calm voice said. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were no longer just glowing gold. They were swirling with the power of creation, the Rinnegan and Sage mode perfectly fused. He rose into the air, his 9 truth-seeking orbs swirling around him. He raised his hands. "You are a part of this world," Naruto said, his voice resonating with the power of a god. "But you are a part that has grown sick. It's time to go home." He wasn't talking to Honest. He was talking to the calamity itself. From the hole in the palace roof, a beam of pure, white light descended, striking Naruto. It was the combined natural energy of the entire planet, drawn to him. Its chosen champion. He channeled it, molding it with 6 paths yin and yang release. He thrust his hands forward. Not an attack, but a touch. He placed his palms on the Avatar's chest. And he pulled. The calamity's core consciousness, the ancient, hungry void, was ripped from Honest's body. The monster shrieked, its form beginning to collapse, its stolen power torn away. Naruto held the squirming, chaotic mass of pure darkness between his palms, a miniature black hole of despair. Then, he flew upwards, through the roof, into the swirling vortex in the sky. He flew till the world was a blue and white marble below him. With a final, cosmic roar, he pushed the calamity's core away from him and clapped his hands together. Shibaku Tensai. The core became a gravity point, and the debris from Budo's sacrifice, the shattered remains of the palace, the very asteroids floating in the planet's orbit, all of it was drawn to the core, encasing it in layer after layer of rock and stone, compressing it, sealing it away forever in a new, second moon that would hang in the sky as a permanent reminder. As the vortex in the sky cleared, and sunlight streamed down for the first time in days, the world was quiet. Epilogue. Months later, the capital, now renamed Shinsedo, new capital, was a city of rebirth. The scars of the battle were still visible, but they were being healed by the hands of a united people. The monstrous architecture of the calamity had been torn down, replaced by clean, simple buildings. The air was clean. The mood was hopeful. A new government had been formed. A council comprised of Najanda, the surviving reasonable generals from Budo's faction, and civilian leaders elected from the provinces. The young emperor, freed from Honest's influence, had willingly ceded his absolute authority, becoming a constitutional monarch, a symbol of a new era of cooperation. The grand architects of this new peace, however, held no official titles. In the gardens of the old imperial palace, now a public park, Naruto sat under a cherry blossom tree. Esdeath was leaning against him, her eyes closed, for once completely at peace. She had found her ultimate thrill not in battle, but in the quiet, possessive victory of the life they were now building. Chelsea sat across from them, reading a report, though her lips were curved in a small, content smile. She was the unofficial head of the New World's intelligence network, the unseen guardian who ensured the peace they had fought so hard for would last. Their quiet was interrupted by a familiar, good-natured argument. "Akame, for the last time, you can't just cut the cake with Murasama. It's unsanitary," Tatsumi's voice pleaded. "It is the sharpest blade," Akame replied, her voice its usual deadpan. "It will provide the cleanest cut." Quote, "Just use the cake knife," Wave insisted, holding out the utensil like a peace offering. The group, the surviving members of Night Raid and the Jaegers, were celebrating. There were no more uniforms. No more factions. Just friends, bickering over dessert. Esdeath opened her eyes and watched them, a flicker of her old cruelty in her gaze. They're noisy. They're happy, Chelsea countered without looking up from her report. They're family, Naruto said quietly, putting an arm around Esdeath's shoulders. He looked at the scene before him. At the clear blue sky, at the two moons, one silver, one a dark, rocky gray, hanging as silent sentinels. He looked at the woman leaning against him, the one who had learned that true strength was in protecting. He looked at the woman across from him, the one who had learned that true change came not from destruction, but from careful, patient construction. He had been born into a new world of hatred, a perfect echo of his old one. But this time, he hadn't just stopped the cycle. He had broken it. He had built a new world from the ashes of the old. He had finally brought a lasting peace. He was home. Chapter 7 End.